Welcome to the world of tomorrow. You are about to take a journey out of this world into the world of the future.
The atomic age was born.
The world of tomorrow became the world of today,
bringing together all people in a new era of understanding.
Good sense requires that all of us prepare for any eventuality.
Imagine, if you can, an electronic brain operating at millionths of a second speed.
Electrical pulses transmitted with the speed of light.
Limitless power at man's command. On man's wisdom, on his firmness in the use of that power, depends now the future of his children and his children's children. But wisdom demands, too, that we take time to understand this force.
Combat Information Center is alert. Its radars probing the darkness, ready to give early warning of any unseen enemy.
But have no fear, we are monitoring the situation. Welcome into the situation which we are monitoring from our respective locations.
And again, I would like to point out that we still are the original monitoring the situation.
We are the original.
So, those...
Except no substitutes.
Yes, those big money backers, they might be getting a letter from us at some point. But,
I haven't seen their stuff. I think I followed them and they haven't even been coming up to my timeline. I have a feeling they're going to fail on their own. But
yeah, me too. But, it might be worth shaking the bushes to see if a couple of coins come out. Anyway,
Mario coin noises.
Yeah, ding, 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 ding. Hope springs eternal, my friend. So
yeah, exactly.
let's jump in.
Am I overlit? I'm feeling a little like these lights are going crazy on me here.
Well, there's a pulsing thing again, which I think might be appropriate to the topic of the day. There's a sort of a low pulsing, the green LEDs.
I mean,
in the
we
background.
could get rid of the green.
No, I like the green.
Right.
Go green. Yeah, it's totally appropriate for today's episode. So.
It is.
All right, well, kick us off, brother man.
So, first of all, what I want to do is a couple of housekeeping things because we always forget to do this at the beginning. So I want to ask everybody, if you like the show, even if you don't like the show, but you just feel like being nice, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. We're trying to get our algorithmic presence boosted, and any interactions and engagements help with that. They help other people to see the show. They help us get to the point where we can monetize the show, so we can offset some of the investment of time and money that we actually put into making it. All the equipment, the software, everything, it's not free.
Dare I say monetization of the situation?
Monetization situation. Yes, that's correct.
Yeah. Okay, well, we're trying.
Also want to let you guys know, I don't know if you've been looking in the descriptions of these videos. If you're on audio only, you're gonna have to go to the YouTube page to get these links. I don't have a good place to put it there. But I try to, with every episode, I put related links and resources there. So if you want to read more about the things that we're talking about, if you're curious about a book that we've mentioned, I try to grab as many of those as I can. I don't get them all every time. If there's something we talk about and you want to know about, cool, let us know. But I'm going to try something new this week. We have this new platform that I found called Raindrop. And it's a free kind of like bookmarking, idea grabbing a platform so that you can share and collaborate with other people. So what I'm going to try to do, because this episode has so much in it, so many related links, so I'm going to try to put together a package and link to our Raindrop folder for this episode and see if that works out as a good way to share all the information, because there's so much, it's just going to look ridiculous in the description. So we're going to try linking to that. So give it a shot. It should be free. I don't know if you have to sign up to look at it or if it's public. It's kind of experimental. So we're going to check that out. Also want to give a shout out to Seven. Here's one more thing I want to ask you. The maintenance supervisor, excuse me, for my apartment complex, new guy, really like him. He's on the ball. And we were talking today because he has to do some maintenance related to a leak that was upstairs in my place. And I said, hey, I can't have you doing any repairs from 3:30 to 5:30. We're going to be doing a show. We're recording. He's like, oh, what's the name of your podcast? Oh. And so his name is Seven, and he introduced himself as like the number 7, which I think is kind of a pretty cool name.
Pretty badass.
Yeah. And but anyway, like I told him what we were doing the show on today. His face lit up. He's like, dude, I'm going to subscribe to you. So
love it.
if you're interested in this stuff and you have friends that are interested, just mention us to them because we're easy to find, and then we grow the audience, and then hopefully we can do better shows. So those are the housekeeping items. Anything you want to add?
No, man, that's great. I always kick myself at the end where like, oh yeah, by the way, can you hit the like and subscribe button in hour two and a half? This is probably
part of it is you and I watch a lot of this stuff on YouTube ourselves, and
Yeah.
if we like something, we just like it,
Right.
and we just subscribe to it. So it feels a little superfluous sometimes to ask people, but people don't always think about it. They're enjoying something, they move on, they're busy, they got to do something else. So it's just a quick ask. If you can do it, great. Doesn't cost you anything. So today we're going to talk about me hitting my microphone repeatedly because the arm is on my notepad. We're going to talk about UFOs, demons, disclosure, and deception. That is our topical focus. A lot of
D's there. I like it. I'm a teacher. I love hitting. I have a lot of R's that I use. And
got the quadruple D's today.
Yeah. Well, hello. Easy.
I'm just,
yeah.
I mean,
moving right along.
Monitoring situations.
Situations. Yeah.
So the first half of this show is going to be a little bit of a 101 history. Like, why are we even talking about this? What is the background on this? There are people who are going to be watching this show who are going to be totally into this. They're going to know all this stuff. Let's just look at this as like review for the test. For everybody else, we just want to give you a quick walkthrough of kind of like what is going on with all the UFO stuff. Why is everybody talking about it all of a sudden? Yeah. Is there a history on it? So let me break this down. I'll try not to be too academic about it. I have a big, long outline that I'm going to work from. So you need to stop me if I'm reading too much. But
no, that's good. Let's go.
Okay. So first of all, I want to disambiguate terms because we hear a lot of different terms in UFO world. When we were growing up in the 70s, the 80s, they were just UFOs. That's what everybody called them. Nobody thought anything about it, right? So a couple things happened that caused them to start changing the terminology. Stop hitting the microphone. One of the things is that UFOs became heavily stigmatized. That term, unidentified flying objects, right? It became associated with flying saucers. It became associated with the idea of little green men. There was actually an active disinformation campaign that the government and others put out to try to make UFOs feel sketchy. And one of the ideas here is we really don't want commercial airline pilots and fighter pilots and Navy, boat sailors and captains and we don't want them reporting all this stuff because we're trying to keep it secret. So we're going to kind of make it seem like, you're probably sketchy, a little kooky. Need a psychological evaluation if you say you see one of these things.
What was the name of that project?
Well, we're going to get into that, but Project Blue Book was ostensibly set up to be an investigatory body into the UFO phenomenon, but what it actually did was flood the zone with a lot of easily debunked cases. And by doing that, they made it so it looked like there was nothing to it. All the reports of flying saucers were nothing, yada, 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 right? So this has been an ongoing situation for the better part of 80 years.
In other words, injecting into pop culture and news reports and sort of strange, offbeat grocery store newspapers, sort of these
Weekly
crazy
World
weirdos.
Inquirer, yeah.
Right. These sort of the crazy fringe element of the thing, therefore kind of muddying the waters so much, flooding the zone so much that anyone who would sort of seriously say UFO without blushing or with a healthy dose of irony could be immediately dismissed as fringe.
Well, I think often about the Mike Myers comedy, So I Married an Axe Murderer.
Yeah.
His parents are both into these conspiracy theories, right? And his mom's always reading the tabloids. And he's like, Mom, why can't you read a real newspaper with facts? And she goes, look at this right here. It says mom gives birth to alien baby. That's a fact.
That's a fact.
That's a fact.
Yeah.
Right? So that's kind of what, people started to associate. It's only been in the last year or two that news programs covering these stories stopped playing the X-Files theme song as an intro to their segments. Every single one would play the X-Files theme song, which, X-Files is a great show. I've been rewatching it. I love the show. But come on. Like, it's an attempt to make people look silly when they talk.
Right. And of course the music in particular, sound effects are in particular, like they sort of pass the frontal lobe and they go right to the brainstem. Like, so the associations that you make with do, 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 do,
Yeah.
right. That X-Files, opening, so you immediately sort of almost precognitively file it into Crazyland.
Right.
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I mean, if you talk to, anybody who was in the military, before the last 5 years, and they saw anything, they didn't talk about it. Like, especially pilots, like, they're flying around multi-million dollar machines, engaging in high level tactics, and they have to be at the top of their game at all times. And if they say they saw something and they come back to the, to the ship, because it's usually Navy pilots that see them because there's an ocean connection for whatever reason.
Yeah.
They could get pulled off the flight line. Like, they could, so they were really, really cautious about talking about this stuff, which is why one of the first major military cases around UFOs was the 2004 Nimitz encounter, because Commander David Fravor was he was like the second or third ranking guy in the Pacific. Like, he was the commander of the Black Aces squadron. He was a Top Gun pilot with like 4,000 combat hours. Like, he was a guy who was unimpeachable, basically.
Yeah.
And he came out and was like, "This is what we saw.
Yeah.
Fight me."
Yeah.
But even he didn't do it right away. Like, he didn't come out about it for 10 or 15 years.
Well, the stigma,
at least not publicly.
I mean, the stigma is just so real, right? I mean, independent of whatever it is any of us wind up concluding about this entire topic, really, right? The stigma is real, and it has a way of shutting down an honest inquiry before an inquiry can even get off the ground, so to speak.
Yes, exactly. Right? And so you and I bang on all the time about epistemic humility, right?
Yep.
It's this idea of coming to new information and not having a full cup, where you already think you know all the answers. You have a full cup, you can't pour anything else in there, right? So you should have something in the cup, but there should be room to add new information and to process it as it comes, and make decisions based on evidence and on patterns and on things like that. But if you can pre-bunk things, which is really what was being done here, where you already are at a disadvantage if you talk about it at all and nobody takes you seriously, makes it very difficult for new information to come out because nobody wants to do it. So we've beaten that horse. So the reason that we were even talking about this is because they decided internally, and Jay Stratton, who was the former head of the UAP task force for the Pentagon, was, I believe, the guy who changed the nomenclature to UAP. And UAP was originally unidentified aerial phenomena. It was just close enough to UFOs, but different enough that it didn't carry the same stigma. But then they changed it again to unidentified anomalous phenomena. And the reason for that is because they're not all in the air.
Right.
We're getting more and more reports of USOs, underwater, or unidentified submersible objects.
Yeah.
And so the Navy is tracking this stuff. And a lot of this stuff, by the way, has gotten more frequent as we've upgraded our sensor systems. Ryan Graves, who was a Navy pilot, who now heads up Citizens for Safe Aerospace, I think is the name of it. He said that the Navy pilots he was working with, when they upgraded their radar packages, they started seeing them every day, not with their eyes, but on their sensors. And there were a number of midair near collisions and things like that. And so, he felt it was an obligation to start coming forward and saying, this is a flight safety issue. We need to know what these things are.
Right. And just to insert myself real quick here, U.S. supremacy, right, in the geopolitical sense, is really incumbent upon both aerial and nautical or naval supremacy, right? So the idea that, and really something we talked about, I think, the very first show when we were talking about the breakdown of the post-war consensus and the post-war order, the entirety of the globalism, the global economy is predicated on the seas being protected, the air, the sea lanes being protected, and the airspace being protected, right? And so, one of the reasons why you and I care, and maybe I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself here, but one of the reasons why we care about this topic is that, well, maybe that's not true,
Right.
So,
if you look at the statistics, we field 4 of the top 5 air forces in the world. So it's not just our Air Force, it's our Navy, it's the Marines, it's the U.S. Army Air Corps. Like, we have over 14,000 fighter jets or something. Like, we have a ridiculously high number compared to every other country in the world. We should be the dominant military force in the airspace. And these things are happening, and we don't have an answer to them technologically. And that's what our pilots keep saying over and over again.
So do you want to get into sort of the time frame of all this, Steve, or do you
let
want to hold
me finish
off on that?
this. Let me finish this because, okay, so UAPs is now where we go with this topic. I think we're calling them UFOs for the purposes of the headline of the show, but
keyword anomalous, right?
Anomalous, right? So this includes other things.
Right.
Like, we'll touch on Skinwalker Ranch a little bit because it's relevant, but there's a lot of other weirdness that goes on here, and it's all part of the soup that's making this so confusing to so many people, and why people are really frantic about it this week in particular. We'll get to that. And the last term I just want to throw out there is NHI. NHI is the term that is being used. It means non-human intelligence. There is something that is not human, that is intelligent, that is technologically capable, that is interacting with us in some way, according to the allegations of whistleblowers, right?
Right.
And so they're very careful. They don't call them extraterrestrials. They don't know what they are. There's been a lot of talk about, are they interdimensional beings? Are they us from the future? Are they crypto-terrestrials, like another race of beings that's been on this planet all along and just sealed themselves off, and we don't know about it? Like, theories abound. And so one of the things I kind of want to address right at the outset of this show, this is the biggest topic to try to dive into. There is so much lore. There are so many books. I've personally watched hundreds of hours of documentaries and interviews, and like, there's just so much on this that I've been studying this with regularity for the last almost decade. And I feel like I'm just treading water. So whatever we attempt to do here will not be comprehensive. Just know that if we didn't mention something you thought we should have, sorry. But it's just huge, right? And so we have, though, a lot of different types of data sources. As mentioned, we have amateur experiencers. These are the regular people out there who've seen things, who, either in the air, or they've claimed that they've been abducted, or they've had some other kind of, anomalous experience that we don't know about. Tons of people, by the way, when you start talking about this, will tell you, oh yeah, I remember when I was a kid and I was in the back of the station wagon, my dad was driving, and we were like between these two farms, and we saw this thing and nobody could explain it, and it was definitely not a plane. You'll just hear these stories over and over and over from people.
Yeah, and I would just add to that, people of all different walks of life, right? It does not fit a specific profile or a type of person or a class of person or an educational level, this, that, and the other. I've had, PhDs, guys who've taught theology for their entire career, will call themselves experiencers. And I would I would urge anyone to do a deep dive in just reading through the documentary evidence of experience, right? And again, you have to kind of always put a little asterisk next to that because it's not verifiable as such, right? You know what I mean? But there's just a tremendous amount of what do you call it? Ethnographic evidence.
Anecdotal. I mean, really.
Yeah.
And it's something that Eric Weinstein talks about this a lot. You and I both have a huge amount of respect for him.
Yep.
You were the one who introduced me to him.
Yep.
Just a super smart guy, is a physicist by way of being a math PhD because he knew that physics had run aground. He's constantly out there doing cultural commentary in ways that are very interesting and intelligent. And this is an issue that particularly frustrates him.
Yeah.
Because he says everybody inside is telling him there are no physicists working on this problem. And everybody outside, is like, well, how do you know there are no physicists? And he's like, because I know them all. There's not that many in the physics community that are at the level where they should be doing theoretical physics around things that are being claimed routinely to break the laws of physics. He says the one category of people who should be able to shed some light on this topic are the guys in the discipline you're saying that this stuff falls outside of. Like, they should be able to know, is that physically capable or isn't it? And he says that they're not. But he also says that despite any dispositive, hard scientific evidence that this phenomenon exists, there is a mountain of anecdotal, of ethnographic evidence, of testimonies from people who don't know each other, and they're saying the exact same thing. And he says, with a level of sincerity that they should all be winning Academy Awards. Like, there's no way they're all lying and faking it. I've talked to too many of them.
Yeah.
So he feels like we do, there's a pattern here that's telling a story, but it is remarkably elusive when it comes to hard facts and details. And this is what so many people, including some of the people in our audience who send in, questions for us to answer, are frustrated with. We always hear that this is happening. We always hear that disclosure is coming.
Yeah.
But we've been hearing it for years and years, and nothing ever shows up. Like, go give me the bodies, show me the craft. And it's a fair criticism, but I don't think we get there until we get past the stigma. We get past the program of secrecy, which all the whistleblowers say the factions of the government that control this stuff will do anything to keep it secret, up to and including murder, which has been claimed multiple times.
Yeah.
Or just destroying your life, destroying your career, putting you in jail, destroying your family. I mean, there was a guy, Sullivan was his last name, and I don't even know his story, but he was supposed to testify before Congress about this stuff, and then very mysteriously had a drug overdose and died, and it was ruled a suicide. And it was like, this guy had no indication that he had those problems.
No history.
I mean, I don't know what his history was, but there was no indication that he was going to commit suicide. He was on the docket, like he was supposed to go in and testify. And then next thing you know, he's dead. And this is like the disappearing scientists that are all connected to this that we talked about last time.
And I think a comp for people in the audience, it's like, this is like mafia stuff, right? This is like the through line in The Godfather, where all of a sudden, either you turn up mysteriously missing, or you have a sudden change of testimony, right? So it's just it can, and this hovers around the topic. Right. This weird things happen to people who wade in any kind of official capacity with this topic in particular.
And people like Dr. Eric Davis, who've worked close to this topic within the government or related contractors for many years, say they keep it secret by keeping it under the umbrella of the classified structure. They have you, like, you are committing a crime if you disclose these things. And so the only way for this to happen is for whistleblowers to get protection, for Congress to take it seriously, for Congress to pass some kind of legislation that has teeth that says we need to get these secrets out. And so one of the reasons we're talking about this now is because Trump has come forward without an executive order, but he's come forward and said, look, everybody's interested in this. Let's get the files out there. Let's go, and we're all skeptical. We all saw what happened with the Epstein files and, the partial release and all this. And we can get into that later, but there's movement on this at the executive level that there's never been, which is why so many people are talking about it now. So unless you have any questions, I'm going to move on.
Yeah, let's go.
Okay, so data sources that we have: amateur experiencers, qualified witnesses, pilots, scientists, intelligence community officers. We have media reports, lots of them, more than you would think. They were very commonly reported in the 50s and 60s. We have sensor data, limited. We have declassified videos and photos that the Pentagon has said, we don't know what the hell this is. Usually from military pilots, sometimes from naval vessels, sometimes from base installation cameras and sensors. And then we have, claims of biological remains. There's a guy I follow on X. His name is Richard Geldrich. I don't know how you pronounce his last name. And we started following each other during the New Jersey drones thing that happened a couple years ago. And he is a computer programmer who developed a database to begin capturing all of the historical reports on the UFO topic. It's called UFO-search.com. We'll put that in the links, but there are over 55,000 reports in that database.
That's a lot.
And it's searchable. Like, this is not a small number of incidents that are being reported. And so, we also have this question about how long has this been going on? And there's an entire series that I've actually never watched called Ancient Aliens. I think it's on the History Channel or something.
Well,
like
I was
that.
going to bring up Ancient Aliens because, has there been a more effective version of confirming the stigma, then that guy, I mean, it's the great meme.
I
He's
can
like,
never remember his name. He's got that great name.
aliens. Right. You know, and it's a sort of a perfect example.
Sakadopoulos or whatever
Yeah,
his
and
name
you
is.
can
I don't know.
insert it. You can insert it. But, you know, like that is a perfect meme that has chased off anybody with
Yeah.
any sense
It's
of
aliens.
right, with any sense of trying to like function broadly in the mainstream, right? It's a sort of a perfect example.
Yeah. So, yeah, and he's an interesting character. He actually shows up on X sometimes in these discussions.
Yeah.
You know, does not deploy his own meme. If it were me, I would. But
It would be my avatar, man. I'd dress up. I would only wear that uniform for the rest of my life. That kind of brown suit with the yellow shirt. I mean, I would
make
wear
sure
it
your
every
hair
day.
is as crazy as possible.
I'd wear it every day. Every day.
But so here's the thing, though. There is a lot of theorizing about how long this goes back. You know, and there are people who read it into biblical stories. There are people who think that they're, you know, that the fingerprints of some kind of advanced race, you know, whether it was ancient humans that had become technologically advanced and were wiped out in the Younger Dryas period, or whether it was aliens or whatever, you know, involved in building the pyramids or Göbekli Tepe or, you know, all this weird stuff, all this weird archaeological stuff that they're finding that they're like, how did these people do this back then? They didn't have machines. They didn't have anything. You know, and they built these structures that are just totally physically improbable. And, you know, there's this new, I mean, I saw a Rogan episode the other day where they're talking about the labyrinth under the pyramids in Giza. They've been doing, you know, these new LiDAR scans, and there's supposedly some huge metallic object inside of a giant chamber under the ground. And so, you know, everybody talks about this stuff, right?
Yeah, right.
But I mean, even more recently than 2, 3, 4, 5,000 years ago, one of the most fascinating things to me in the world is the Nuremberg UFO.
That's right. I hope you're going to bring that up. Yeah.
You know, so if you've never heard of this, there's this painting. You can look it up on Wikipedia. I'll read you the description, probably throw the image up on the screen. Perfect. But it was this woodcut that was done in 1561 of what was described as a massive aerial battle. It's one of the first mass sightings of not just a UFO, but like, it looks like a Star Wars scene painted in 1500 style, right?
Yeah.
So the description that the painter put on it blows me away. All right. In the morning of April 14th, 1561, at daybreak, between 4 and 5 on the small clock. I need to start calling morning the small clock.
That's right.
A dreadful apparition occurred on the sun, and then this was seen in Nuremberg, in the city, before the gates, and in the country, by many men and women. At first there appeared in the middle of the sun 2 blood-red semicircular arcs, just like the moon in its last quarter. And in the sun, above and below on both sides, the color was blood. There stood a round ball of partly dull, partly black, ferrous color. Likewise, there stood on both sides, and as a torus about the sun, such blood-red ones and other balls in large number, balls, orbs, like we hear about orbs all the time now, right? About 3 in a line and 4 in a square, also some alone. In between these globes, there were visible a few blood-red crosses, between which there were blood-red strips, coming thicker to the rear, and in the front, malleable like the rods of reed grass, which were intermingled, among them 2 big rods, one on the right, the other to the left, and within the small and big rods there were 3, and also 4 and more globes. These all started to fight among themselves, so that the globes, which were first in the sun, flew out to the ones standing on both sides. Now think about this. I'm going to pause here. We're way before the invention of human flight. There are no artificial objects in the skies. And this was seen by a lot of people. This is just, it's just amazing.
I mean, it's mind blowing, right? You know, and I think what happens, I'm guessing, Steve, what happens with stuff like this is that it gets consigned to, well, they were medieval knuckle dragging fools. They're primitives, right? They're dumb. They didn't even know they knew nothing. And so this is just an overheated imagination, an exercise in mythcraft or something like that. And it's possible, right? It's possible, but man, it really does sound like some sort of space battle you would see in a movie.
Well, it wasn't like a sundog or something, like he says they flew back and forth among themselves and fought vehemently for over an hour. Like this wasn't something that happened for 30 seconds or, And when the conflict in and again out of the sun was most intense, they became fatigued to such an extent that they all, as said above, fell from the sun down on the earth as if they all burned. And then they wasted away on the earth with immense smoke. I mean, this is Star Wars.
Yeah, right.
Description. You know, it's a ship battle is what it sounds like. And after all this, there was something like a black spear, which in the lithograph you can see, I mean, it looks like a Star Destroyer.
Yeah.
Which is crazy. Very long and thick. Sighted, the shaft pointed to the east, the point pointed west. Whatever such signs mean, God alone knows, although we have seen, shortly one after the other, many kinds of signs on the heaven which are sent to us by Almighty God to bring us to repentance, etc., interpreted through the eyes of faith, which you would expect.
Absolutely.
But fear, I mean, they say, after all, the God-fearing will by no means discard these signs, but will take it to heart as a warning of their merciful Father in heaven, will mend their lives and faithfully beg God that he may avert his wrath, including the well-deserved punishment on us, so that we may temporarily here and perpetually there live as his children. For it, may God grant us help. Amen. By Hans Glaser, letter painter of Nuremberg.
Wow.
I have chills. Like it's
it's so good.
Cool, interesting. Explain that, haters. Like I don't know. I mean,
but again, I think in order to you have to kind of dismiss it out of hand, right? As sort of medieval forgery.
Some part of your brain does. You're like, well, I'll never know the answer to that. So it could be anything. Like what's on Netflix, and that's kind of what happens, right? So the ancient order, the ancient era of UFOs could go back as long as you want to dig into things. Like there are centuries and centuries, millennia of things that could be understood in that way. So what we're going to focus on, though, as interesting as that is the modern era.
Yeah. Okay.
Which basically begins in the 1930s, as far as we know. And what happens is, in the 1930s, in Italy, there is, in the town of Magenta, there is a crash of a craft of some kind. We've never gotten any real details on this. We know a little bit about it. Most of what we know, we've heard about it elsewhere, but David Grusch, when he came forward, intelligence community whistleblower, who investigated this within the Pentagon and interviewed 40 witnesses, he got a lot of information on the programs, on the historical sightings, and all this kind of stuff. And he says, according to him, that this thing was a bell-shaped or disc-like craft that crashed near Magenta in northern Italy. Mussolini's regime recovered it and moved it into a secure airbase. They set up a secret study group. He says, this isn't included in the research that I did today, but that they basically asked the Nazis once they formed up a team. They're like, is this your guys' stuff? Like, where did this get? I mean, the Nazis were doing some advanced tech stuff and fiddling around with weird things, but they were like, no, but we'll take a look at it, But basically what happens, according to Grusch, is at the end of the war, Pope Pius XII, of all people,
things that I didn't, before I ever heard any about this, I remember stumbling upon this the first time, and I'm pretty sure I reached out to you and I'm like, am I reading this correctly?
Am I being punked?
Are we talking about Pope Pius? Like what? Because you and I are Catholic, come from the whole Catholic thing, right? It's sort of like, wait. Is somebody just sort of inserting this slide into it because they know that I'll be like, wait, what? It's so weird. It's so weird.
Apparently, though, back in the day, the Vatican had the best intelligence network in Italy. Yeah. They were old school. They'd been playing the Game of Thrones for a long time. There were allegedly mafia guys that were informants to the Vatican. They created an intelligence network. Who knows? All I know is the claim is that Pope Pius XII called up somebody in the American government and said, look, the Italians have this thing and you may want to come grab it because we don't really know what it is. And so the OSS, which was the precursor to the CIA, mounts an operation 44, 45, somewhere around there, with allegedly Vatican assistance, and they go grab this craft and bring it back to the United States. Grusch says that he reviewed the documents about it. It was believed to be a non-human craft, part of a larger retrieval program. And this is where we get into this story that begins in the modern post-war era. Why does everything relate to the post-war era?
Yes, it's amazing, isn't it?
Of basically the allegations that the U.S. government created a crash retrieval and reverse engineering program of some kind that was ongoing for a long time. It is probably still ongoing, according to sources in some faction today, but it's referred to usually as the Legacy program because it was something that went on for a really long time, where they brought all these craft in and try to figure out what makes them tick. And can we glean anything from this? And, we always reverse engineer enemy technology if we can get a hold of it.
Yeah, good. I was just going to say, like, the whole idea of retrieval and reverse engineering has a long-standing pedigree, right? So, that there's some quip. It's like, any weapon that you deploy in the field of battle, you have to be prepared for it to be replicated in some short window of time by your enemies, right?
I mean, this is why when we mounted the rescue of the downed airmen in Iran,
we
scuttled hundreds of millions of dollars worth of planes because we couldn't get them out of there, and we didn't want them getting our tech, so we blew them up.
Right.
This just happened a couple of weeks ago. So this still is an ongoing thing. I mean, we took Shahed drones that Iran designed and we reverse engineered them and started using them against Iran. So it's like, this is how war is. This is how militaries acquire and utilize novel technologies, because there's always a race to develop whatever the newest, latest, greatest thing is, right? So then,
and by the way, so to jet engines, right? So to nuclear weapons, right? It's the same pattern, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's how we believe that it's. I don't know if we know for sure, but that's how the Soviets got nukes. Is they got a mole or somebody into the Manhattan Project, and nuclear secrets started making their ways over there.
Yeah, I'm just wanting to, again, for the audience's sake, understand that this is just the way things operate. Right.
Yeah,
and major advances have been driven in part by races to get there first or to cover it up first. Right. So it just is it is the way that military technological advances sort of seem to run in these familiar patterns.
And it makes sense that it would be done no matter what the origin of the craft was, and that they would keep it as secret as possible because of the advantages that it could confer. So, I mean, there's nothing crazy in the claim other than where is this thing coming from, So August 1945 is the first major American crash. July 16th, 1945 was the Trinity test at White Sands in New Mexico, the first plutonium bomb detonation, the first nuclear weapon detonation of any kind on the planet. But they tested the plutonium bomb because they weren't sure if it was going to work. They knew the atomic bomb would, but the trigger mechanism for the plutonium bomb for Fat Boy was harder to pull off. And so they did a test, and that's the one that everybody saw in the Oppenheimer movie. And
exactly,
we've all kind of become familiar with that. But within weeks after that happened, there was a crash very close to that site. And it's not as well known because it gets blended in under the aura of Roswell.
Exactly.
You look like you had a question, though.
No, go ahead. This is good.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, I mean, the basics on the Trinity crash is that two eyewitnesses, a father and a son, said that there was a recovery of a small craft with bodies. It's been written about in Jacques Vallée's book, Trinity, the Best Kept Secret, which is on my list of books to get. That I'm going to need a whole library just for this stuff.
I know, really.
It predates Roswell by 2 years. Vallée calls it one of the strongest early crash retrieval cases. So interesting. 1947, July, we have the Roswell crash. This is the most well-known, obviously, in American history.
You said 47?
July of 1947. Yeah. Initial military press release that went out into the newspapers was it was a flying disc. It was recovered. Then the guys from Washington show up, and the story changes.
Well, I mean, it's not really a disc.
It's not even not really a disc. It's a weather balloon. Here's a bunch of fake debris. We're going to take photos of you holding the fake debris.
Wait, you can do that?
Yeah, apparently you can.
Wait, you could just take pictures and print it in a newspaper and just like that. That's how this works, Steve?
Pics, and it didn't happen.
Yeah, right. There it is. Right?
Yeah.
Exactly.
So, but Grusch and other insiders say, no, this was a real crash. There were non-human bodies that were recovered. I posted something on X the other day that got complete crickets, but it was like 4 excerpts of this really interesting interview with this guy named W. Glenn Davis, who was a funeral home. I think he was the mortician or the funeral home director in the area near Roswell when the crash happened. And back in those days, those guys also ran the ambulance services for the town. The hearse was dual purpose, right?
Right.
And so this guy says, you know, he gets a call from the air base, or it was the Army Air Base, I think, because I don't know if we'd established the Air Force yet.
No, the Air Force is just after the war.
Okay. So,
51,
but that there was, you know, they start asking him, you know, what are the smallest, again, this is his testimony. We don't know if it's true. He's dead. He's been dead for a decade. We can't ask him. But he says that he was asked, what are the smallest hermetically sealed caskets you can get? And then
I'll just phone up the local, you know, supply store and get super small hermetically sealed caskets, because, you know, on speed dial, basically. I mean,
he's this old school, slow talking guy.
So you want
just telling the story about this thing that happened back in the day.
Pure American.
But so he's going on and on about this call, and he's like, and the guy asks him, okay, well, what would be your procedure for dealing with bodies that have been out in the elements and there's damage to them and there's decomp and all this kind of stuff? And so he gives them the whole process and tells them, you know, we soak them in formaldehyde and we do this and we do that and the other. And they're like, no reason. We were just curious if something like this ever happens. How would hypothetically somebody handle this?
Me and the boys were talking, you know, we were having a couple of beers and we just got to talking and we said, you know what, I've got a cool what if, you know, we were just shooting the breeze, Steve. I mean, you know, totally normal.
Exactly. And so he's like, I was curious as hell to know what went on. He's like, but I didn't drive over there until I got a call saying that they had an injured airman who needed transport to the hospital. And he's like, so I go and I pick him up. And I bring him to the hospital, and, you know, he's got injuries, his broken nose. I think he had injuries to his head. Looked like he'd been in some kind of a crash. I don't think the guy talked about what had happened to him. So he gets to the hospital, and I'll just tell this story briefly because it's so weird. He gets to the hospital, and he's walking through, and he sees this female lieutenant who I believe is a nurse. And she sees him, and she's like, what are you doing here? You need to get the hell out of here. You're going to be in a lot of trouble. And he's like, I'm bringing somebody, you know, over for this, you know, and he starts asking people, like, what crashed? Like, what happened? You know, because he'd already gotten this other call. And the military guys start getting pissed. And they're like, there was no crash. You are not going to talk to anybody about any crash. And the one guy, according to him, said to him, you know, because he was like, what are you going to do to me? I'm a civilian. Like, you can't do anything. And he goes, yeah, but somebody might be picking your bones out of the sand. And he was like, okay. And he said he went outside. He got the MPs literally dragged him outside of the hospital. And he's like, I saw there were other ambulances there and they had debris inside, like metallic debris of some kind. And it looked weird. He's like, I didn't know what it was. It looked like it was shaped like a canoe. And it was, you know, all this. So he kind of gives this description. So anyway, he starts calling after this lieutenant, the nurse. And he's like, I kind of want to know what's going on. She's like, all right, I'll meet you for lunch, right? So this is days later. So she meets him for lunch, and he's like, she's nervous the whole time. She doesn't touch her food. She's upset. And she starts describing how they brought in these bodies, and they're weird, and they're small, and I think they only had 3 fingers or something like that. And she gave him an anatomical description, but she said the worst thing was they smelled so bad that everybody who was in the operating room was getting sick.
Wow.
And so she's like, I had to leave. Like, the doctors kept having to leave, you know, all this stuff. Right. And so she tells him this whole story. And then they part ways, and he tells her he's going to follow up. And he calls back to the airbase like a week later, and they're like, oh, she was transferred. And he's like, what do you mean she was transferred? She's only been here for 3 months, and it's her first assignment. Like, that doesn't happen. No, she was transferred. And then he follows up, like, she had left him her APO where she was going, which was in London, I think. They were moving her overseas. So he follows up, writes to them. They write back, and they're like, we're sorry, the recipient is no longer here. She's deceased. She died in a plane crash in a training exercise, along with a bunch of other people who were on the plane. And he's like, I don't know if she's really dead. He's like, I kind of don't believe that she is. They probably just didn't want me to know what was going on. But he's like, I never heard from her again. So this is the kind of stories that you get, and you're like, what do you do with this? I mean, this was actually put up on YouTube, this whole 45-minute interview, which was done in 1990. So it's, you know, 40 plus years later. but it was put up on YouTube by the National Archives. Like, it's an official government document, basically, a government video, and you can watch it. And I guess they just assume, well, it sounds crazy enough. Nobody's going to believe it anyway. Like, I don't know. Like, what do you do with it? So these are the kinds of stories, that you run across. And then you get Project Blue Book, which is designed to manage stories like this. So Project Blue Book is started in 1952. Which in itself is an interesting year. That's the year of the first hydrogen bomb. And Eric Weinstein always says that was kind of the year that the world changed. So 52 to 69 is Project Blue Book.
Got it.
It was run by the U.S. Air Force. It was their public UFO investigation program. They investigated over 12,000 sightings. The public face of it was, we're just doing a scientific study of this stuff. We're going to help out the American people. The actual mandate was to try to explain away and debunk as many of these things as possible.
Pre-bunk.
Pre-bunk. They actually only had 701 cases out of the 12,618 that they investigated that remained unexplained after analysis. So they were doing some real investigations.
So the United States government is putting resources into this whole, what we're calling story.
Yes.
Right. They're like, those are resources. Those are
They're
real
throwing
things.
taxpayer money at it.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So, this is, again, for those people who want to play the nothing burger game, like, okay, maybe it is in the end a nothing burger, but there have been a tremendous amount of resources dedicated and spent.
And let's throw a little extra
open up.
weight on that pile because,
go ahead.
I'm jumping ahead in the timeline, but one of the reasons why this all ramped up this year is because Barack Obama went on a podcast and said that he believed that aliens and UFOs are real, and then he walks it back 2 days later, and then Trump is asked on Air Force One during a presser by Peter Doocy of Fox News, Obama said this, what do you make of that? And he goes, well, he's going to get into trouble. He's not supposed to be revealing classified information. Like, that's a weird response.
Yeah.
To what it is that he said. And he's like, maybe I can get him out of trouble. Maybe I'll do something to declassify these, right? And then later that day, he actually puts out a tweet or a
Truth Social or
whatever that thing is, and basically says, we're going to do this. But I mean, you don't classify things that don't exist, right? So the fact that his reaction was that's classified means there's something to classify, and that needs to be considered as we go through all of this. So I'll just leave that there. So Blue Book was interesting. I, would love to dive deeper into the history of the characters. I believe J. Allen Hynek was the main guy there, and he was a complicated guy. He resigned. I don't know if he was part of the PSYOP, if he was willing, unwilling, partially complicit. I don't have the facts on that straight in my head.
But
I do think it's interesting though to note that he was the mentor of Jacques Vallée.
Right.
And they're both Rosicrucians, if we want to throw more conspiracy
right.
stuff.
We'll hold off on that for a little bit. But yeah, I think that's important to sort of remember. But, when you start to listen to these stories, and again, Eric Weinstein got into a little bit of this, that things become so siloed, like radically siloed, right? And so you can see the same kind of pattern operating here. He was talking about physics, he was talking about national defense things, but and maybe it's the same thing, right? But that things are so siloed that you're working on this like very hyper specific thing, and you literally don't know what the guy in the next cubicle or the next room is working on. You may in fact be working on the same thing, different parts of the same thing, but information gets so tightly constricted that there's just no way to tell. And so I always wonder, with these kinds of stories and these kinds of testimonies, is that, who is a kind of central intelligence that kind of holds this whole thing together? Again, I know you don't have an answer for that right now, but I just want to put that out in this conversation.
Well, I will tell you that when he was asked point blank that question by, I forget who, might have been by one of the members of Congress, Dave Grusch said the closest to an organizing principle in all of that was Dick Cheney.
Yeah, so
and
weird.
He's like, and he was done with that, walked away before he died, So he's like, that was the last guy I was aware of who would have been sort of a central coordinating figure. And that's based on his own investigations, not because he knew him personally in that
Right.
capacity.
Right.
So that's an interesting data point in and of itself. So, okay, so the Project Blue Book era kind of comes to an end. More or less, it's done its job. They've disqualified the vast majority of the cases. They've debunked them. The public kind of moves on, bringing in a personal anecdote. So that ended in 69. I was born in 77. I'm in maybe 6th grade, maybe 5th grade, and I start reading library books about Project Blue Book and all their stuff, and I started getting really interested in that stuff. Where I fell off as a kid, and this ties into the larger question of angels, demons, aliens, everything like that, is I started to read a book by Whitley Strieber called Communion. And I was like 12, and it was about his abduction experiences. I don't remember a single detail from the book. But I just remember getting so creeped out by reading the book, like felt like it was evil somehow, that I just dropped the book like beside my bed. And I'm like, I'm never picking it up. I'm not interested in this anymore. I don't want to look into this anymore. Like it freaked me out, but I was a kid, but there was this sense of like, there's something like creepy and preternatural here, and I don't like it. And that put me off. And then, I go through high school and I get into religious stuff, and I'm doing other things and I'm not thinking about it. So only later do I come back to this topic, but it was something I was very interested in as a kid. And at the time, Project Blue Book was still being presented in the 80s and 90s as like, this was a legit, like government was checking this out and they didn't find anything. Like that was the way that it came across.
Right.
Which is very interesting.
Yeah. What do you make of that 12-year-old allergy to it?
I mean, I don't know, other than just, when something creeps you out badly enough.
I guess I ask because you're a pretty intuitive person, right? And you seem to feel some pattern that was hugely disquieting, right? I mean, for you to just sort of take a book that you're very interested in and you get to this point, you're like, that's it. I'm tapping out.
Yeah.
Like, this is just too much. And then you literally walk away from it for 20 years.
Sure. Well, I mean, I was immersed in a very religious paradigm.
Yeah. Okay.
So there was that. There was, I mean, I was the kind of kid who had a big imagination, was easily scared, I watched Aliens the same year by myself and barely got through it.
I mean,
my parents were somewhere else, and I'm like, I'm going to try watching this movie by myself. That's going to go well.
Because that's essentially a horror film, right? It's a horror film in a sci-fi idiom,
Yeah. So I don't know for sure, but again, at that time, I mean, I'm sure I had still the same whatever the instincts are that I have, but not self-aware of those. They're not trained in any way. So
and you don't remember any particular aspect of the Strieber book that set you off?
There probably was sexual stuff in there, which probably bothered me, because I think that's in some of his books. That stuff happened. I don't know if the communion thing, the theme, again, I have not gone back to this book. Like I put it on my Kindle Unlimited and then I still didn't read it. Which was last year,
Interesting. Okay.
But I mean, I think the communion thing may have dovetailed with symbolism of the Eucharist. Like there was some weird stuff.
Yeah.
Okay. And not everybody thinks Whitley Strieber is a reliable witness in any way. I don't know what his deal is. He was the epitome of why I didn't want to get into the woo and weird part of this stuff.
Got it.
And so when I got back into it, I was much more and like, give me the nuts and bolts. Talk about debris, talk about bodies, talk about sensors, talk about radar. Talk to me about the tangible things, so I don't have to try to figure out what the hell that stuff is all about.
Yeah, it's funny because I think I drift toward the woo. Like the tech stuff is really interesting to me, and I don't dismiss it out of hand, and I'll go there. But the woo stuff is that kind of the disquieting elements of the woo, and you see this really in experiencer stories. The woo part is I don't know. I think I have a certain tolerance for woo. not in a kind of credulous way exactly, but I've just seen some really weird stuff in my life. And so,
Yeah. Well, the woo stuff in UFO world, a lot of it's really dark.
yeah, yeah,
And I don't know what to do with it.
yeah,
I
yeah,
can't measure it. I can't
yeah,
identify it. I can't get definitive answers on it. And so it's the kind of stuff that keeps you up at night because you're like, what is that? Like, what does
yeah,
that have to do, with
yeah,
all this? Which is, again, getting to what this is all building up to and what we've been talking about in the title of the show.
yeah,
Okay, so moving on, because man, we're chewing through time, but like
yeah.
I
Let's
feel
go.
like it's important that the first UFO episode we lay the groundwork.
Yeah, that's fair.
It
That's
ain't
fair.
gonna be the last because this is gonna
This is
keep
what we
going.
do.
This is what we do. So I would say jumping ahead in the timeline from Blue Book, which kind of carries its way through to Bob Lazar. Now, Bob Lazar is this really unique figure in the history of UFO land. He was the guy who put Area 51 on the map.
Right.
Nobody knew
Right.
it was a thing. And so his basic story is he was this young guy who was a tinkerer. He claimed, like, all of his claims are disputed by people. And there are indications that the government kind of tried to erase him
Yeah.
after he came forward with his story. So it's very, very difficult to know what's real and what's not. The only thing I can tell people is I have watched every interview pretty much that he's done. I think the guy is telling the truth about at least 80% of what he's talking about. He's cagey around certain details that I think there's probably good reason for. But my personal BS meter, which is very solid, he's not lying.
Mhm.
And that's all I know what to say. So his story is worked at Los Alamos for a little while. This is a guy who, he built like jet cars. Like he put a jet engine on his wife's Honda Civic, and it's actually really relevant because what happened is he's working at Los Alamos and Edward Teller, who's now elderly, comes and gives a talk. I don't know if it was at Los Alamos or at the local college, but the local newspaper had written up a story on Bob Lazar's jet car. So he goes to this lecture by Edward Teller, who, if you don't remember, Teller-Oolong equation, this is the father of the hydrogen bomb. He was in the Manhattan Project. He was a major mid-century physicist, Hungarian-born, I think. Really interesting character. So he goes to this lecture. Teller is sitting outside because Bob got there early, and he's reading the newspaper, and he's reading the story about Bob and his jet car.
Right.
And he's like, oh, well, this will make it easy for me to introduce myself to him. He's
Yeah.
like, I'm the guy that you're reading about right there. So they had a little conversation, do the lecture. He talked to him about maybe getting a job, doing something physics related. And Teller gave him like an employment agency to call, and he does. And he goes for this interview, and they're like, and I may be getting some of the details wrong. Goes for this interview, and they're like, we don't think we want you for this job. We think we might want you for a different one. And they don't really tell him what it is. And so he kind of gets brought into this program. He goes from Vegas. There are these flights. I think he was living in Vegas at the time.
Right.
And they have these flights out to Area 51. And from there, he says he was put on a bus with blacked out windows and taken out to the middle of the desert. There's this area, there's this whole test range around. I mean, the whole desert around there is all used for military testing and stuff. It used to be a silver mine. This family owned it. The Air Force basically took it from them and never paid them for it. I mean, it was one of those kind of stories.
What is it?
They literally, their
domain?
house was getting hit with molten pellets from nuclear bomb testing. They had to leave. They just had to leave.
Yeah.
So anyway, this area called the Groom Lake and the Papoose Dry Lake Bed, there's this whole, if you've ever been in the Southwest, there's all these rivers and lakes that have no water in them.
Right.
And they're still referred to as lakes and rivers. It's weird. So he goes out, he gets taken out to this place. There's a door in the side of a freaking mountain. And they bring him inside, and there's this whole facility in the mountain. And according to him, he does his first day, and it's all introductory paperwork and all this kind of crap. The next time they bring him back, and he didn't work a regular schedule. It was like they called him and said, we need you today, kind of a thing.
Yeah.
And so then he'd go take these Janet flights from Vegas. He would go to EG&G, which was his direct contract employer, then go to Vegas, take the flights over to Area 51, bus out to this place in the middle of nowhere that nobody knows exists. And he says there's a hangar built into the side of the mountain, and there's freaking UFOs in there. Like 9 of them. And he said there was just one, that he was tasked with working on reverse engineering the propulsion system. That was the only thing. So going back to what you were talking about
narrow focus.
compartmentalization.
Narrow focus.
Yeah. And so there were 3 projects that he was briefed on. He also said he was given a stack of briefing material, which had all this information about where these things supposedly came from and everything. He's like, I don't know if any of it was true. You know, there's this concept called passage material where they will divulge true information to somebody, but they will add custom tailored fake information and put it in there, which creates a signature. It's a trace. So if, you know, he was told that these aliens were from Zeta Reticuli and this and that, and if he shares that with anybody and that information comes back to his superiors, they're like, oh, that was Bob because we put that in his briefing.
Right.
We put a different story in somebody else's briefing, you know, so that was the kind of thing. But there were 3 projects, Project Galileo, which was the propulsion project, Project Sidekick, which was the potential weapons, usage of the reverse materials, and then the third one is, the name is escaping me, but there were 3. If you want to see a great documentary about this, it just came out. It's called S4, the Bob Lazar story, I think is the name of it. It's by Luigi Venditelli. It's available on Amazon Prime and probably other places. You can go to projectgravatar.com. You can download it directly, I think. Nominal cost for the movie, but it was very interesting. I found it very interesting. And what they did is they went in with 3D software and they spent 5 years recreating the entire environment that he worked in according to his memory.
Yeah.
And created it all for the film. They're creating a virtual reality experience where you can walk through and you can see the UFOs. And and Bob says on interviews that he's done since, he's like, it's like they downloaded it from my brain. He said, I cannot believe how accurate they got this, down to the point where like they were having the same problems lighting the inside of the craft because of its physical shape and the materials that it was made out of. Because Bob was like, no matter how many lights we threw at it, it was always dark inside. And then they lit it in a virtual environment. They had the exact same problem.
Wow.
And like the director, Luigi, he was like, there's no way if he was making this up, he could have known that 2 like bright halogen military grade lights inside this flying saucer would only light the immediate area and everything else was dark. He's like, I had professional lighting experts trying to figure out why the hell we couldn't light the inside of this virtual environment. And it was because of the physics of the way the light bounces around the space and all that kind of stuff. He said, we had to turn the lights up like 10 times what they were supposed to be just so that we could film it because it was too dark to see. You know, it was super interesting stuff. So anyway, so Bob does all this, right? Bob winds up getting really skeeved out by the way his superiors are treating him. He's frustrated by the project because it's so compartmentalized. He's like, we needed to be able to talk to the metallurgical guys and we needed to be able to talk to these guys. Like we needed to know what else was going on. He said, I had a lab partner and he was the only guy I was allowed to talk to about any of the research we were doing. And there was no way you can reverse engineer something without knowing how all the different parts work together. Like you just can't. And he said, the only thing that we knew is we had this little reactor and there were these emitters that focused whatever force it had, and it had what we call the gravitational field. He says now, he's like, I don't even think it's gravity. I think it's some unknown force that is similar to gravity, but it repels instead of attracts.
Yeah.
And he's like, but it was a force field. He's like, you turn this thing on and you would try to put your hands on it and it pushed back. It was elastic. He said it felt like trying to stick the wrong ends of magnets together and you can't ever quite
I know
do
that
it.
feeling.
He's like, but it had that effect on your physical body.
Wow.
And he's like, we didn't know what made it work. And, you know, he has a lot of details about what happened there, but he started to get worried he knew too much and they were going to kill him. This was his fear. Now, as it turns out, what was actually going on and the reason they were starting to be cagey with him is because when you're doing a top secret project, they tap your phones, they do all this stuff, right? They found out his wife was having an affair while he's at the lab all the time. So they start saying, you know, obviously, whenever you're in any kind of classified thing, they look into, do you drink? Do you go out? Do you do this? Do you do that? Is your family life stable? Because any destabilizing event could make you a liability if you're working with sensitive information.
Right, because you're blackmailable.
You're blackmailable. You get drunk and you say something, like whatever it is, whatever it is. So they were kind of
some way.
They were pulling back on having him there because of that, but he thought maybe I knew too much, and so he jumps the gun And he goes to this local news reporter, young at the time, name of George Knapp, who's an investigative journalist for the local Las Vegas TV channel. And he's like, I want to give an interview about what's going on. And so he does. This happens in 1989. The first time he goes, he does this interview. He's in silhouette. You know, he uses a fake name.
Yeah, of course.
All this kind of stuff. Actually used the name of his superior because he couldn't stand him. His
That's
boss's
great.
name was Dennis, so he goes by Dennis.
That's so good.
And he reveals all this stuff that I'm telling you about what's going on, about element 115, which powers the craft, which, by the way, later on, they find out all this extra stuff. Element 115 is synthesized in the Large Hadron Collider. It's a real thing, but we can't keep it stable. He had all these little things that he knew that just perfectly worked out later and corroborated each other, which was really interesting because, like I said, people say there's a lot of holes in his story, but he was the first whistleblower to really come forward and say the government has these. They're trying to reverse engineer them. We're not making any progress because they won't let us work together.
Yeah.
But this is what's going on. And he even took friends out to the desert because he knew the test flight schedule, because they knew how to turn these things on, though they weren't all damaged.
Which is amazing.
So they could fly them somehow.
Wow.
And he said, you know, I mean, imagine that you could transport, I don't know, a Tesla back to the 1500s. Yeah. You could teach somebody in the 1500s how to drive a Tesla. You can't teach them how to make them work. You can't teach them how to make the battery chemistry. You can't teach them how to do anything else, right? You know, so there was some way that they were able to control this thing. And so he tells his buddies, like, let's go, I'll show you. And they bring a camcorder out and everything, and these things are flying around doing crazy stuff. Exactly when he tells them it's going to happen. Those guys are in the documentary. Well, one of them's dead. So it's a very, very interesting story. But Bob Lazar becomes like this legend because he comes out with all this information. He puts Area 51 on the map, and now everybody wants to know what's going on in Area 51. He wasn't actually working at Area 51. He was working at S4, which was a related facility further in the desert. But everybody came away with, what are we doing out there in the desert? Like, what is all this stuff? And so he kind of changes the game, but then that's it. Like, nothing happens. You know, he's never proven right. There's not a disinformation campaign, but there's a character attack campaign that kind of happens against him. They look for everything he ever did wrong, everything his ex-wife did wrong, all this kind of stuff, right? And so he's a controversial figure that still holds a lot of narrative power right at the turning point of, like, the old stuff, the 40s and 50s and 60s stuff is behind us when we really had control. Now this guy uses the power of modern media to come out and kind of pull the sheet back on all this stuff, right? And then that's 89, 90.
Yeah.
Nothing for a while in public at all. Like, it's just a dead zone. And I remember still being interested in it in college and trying to look for stuff, and there was just nothing. Like, there was nothing to really look at, right? But there was stuff going on behind the scenes. So you have Bob Bigelow, very interesting character. Who shows up on the scene. He's an American entrepreneur. He's a billionaire businessman who, started, I think, in real estate development, winds up in aerospace. From the time he's a kid, he's been fascinated with UFOs and all this stuff. And he starts getting into doing contracting for NASA and all this kind of, like, getting into really advanced stuff. And then he starts, and he's a mysterious figure. Like, he'll do interviews and stuff, but you always get the feeling he's not telling you the whole story, kind of a thing. He's a Howard Hughesy kind of character.
Yeah, that's good. That's a good comp.
And so he starts a couple of organizations. One is called the National Institute for Discovery Science, which is his own private organization. They studied UFOs, they studied cattle mutilation, high strangeness, weird stuff that went on. Eric Davis worked for him. A couple other big name guys worked. Hal Puthoff worked with them.
Hal Puthoff, yeah.
Who ran the CIA's remote viewing, like ESP espionage program. Like, the government's been doing some weird stuff in general. Like, look up Project Stargate if you don't believe me. Not the Stargate project, which I think is the new AI thing. It's the government thing where they were using psychics to do remote intelligence work. They discontinued the program, but even President Carter came out and said they used a psychic to locate a downed plane.
Yeah.
And he went, on public record said, we found the plane because of what she told us.
So that's a perfect example of, like, when I'm paying attention to this story and reading these things that you send me, and like the Jimmy Carter one really struck me because it's there. Like, Like it happened. And whether you believe that the psychic was the thing that could actually locate the downs, but like really important people, powerful people in various levels of the government did it.
Yeah.
Right.
To some degree.
And it's just there. And then
and I don't know what you do, but when I read this stuff, a lot of people think I'm just credulous and gullible, but it's like,
yeah.
I don't know how to process this stuff either.
No, if anything,
I have a lot of skepticism, but I'm like,
yeah.
but
if anything, it's the opposite.
There's a historical fact here.
Right. If anything, like I'm the one who's a little bit more credulous about these things. You're always the sort of the hard nose. You're the McPhee character from That Hideous Strength.
Well, it's why I like the nuts and bolts. I want to measure. I want to touch.
Yeah.
I'm doubting Thomas. I don't have a problem with that.
Yeah. No, I know.
Put my fingers in the wounds, man. Like, show me that it's real.
Totally get it. Right. And yet, we have all these things. These are significant data points. And again, it doesn't draw an actual blazing red line like here or, there. But it's like you have to, if you're going to sort of glibly retreat to a comfortable position for your priors, you have to ignore lots and lots and lots of things. And I think that's what frustrates me,
Yeah, I mean,
broadly, generally.
I just don't think you can I was having a conversation with a guy online today who I like, but is a big time skeptic, And,
Yeah.
And I was just like, I just don't think you can have not P as your default position.
What do you mean?
You shouldn't have P. You shouldn't have not P. Like when you're dealing with new information about things that are unfalsifiable, right? I can't prove yes. I can't prove no.
Yeah.
Then your default position should be: is there enough of a pattern? Is there enough smoke that it looks like there's a fire and it should warrant me encouraging more investigation? Or is my default position, I don't believe any of that stuff. If you want to prove it, you got to bring me a truckload of evidence. It's like, no, that's dogma. That's something else. That's not like, you need to be like, that's interesting. Like one incident is just a data point. 2 incidents is okay. You got my attention. 3, all right, a pattern is starting. And when you have thousands, it's time to say there's something going on here. And rather than me just being purely skeptical, I'm going to be like, well, I'm going to take this in. I don't know what to do with it. I'm going to file it away. And in my mind, I'm going to begin building a mental map of all this stuff and feel what the weight of it is and see where it feels like it's flimsy and see where it feels like it's solid and go from there. You can't do anything else. I mean, people get so frustrated. One of the biggest frustrations that I always hear expressed by people, were expressed by people today when we were prepping for the podcast, and I asked people what they think. It's like, where's the hard evidence? Show me the bodies. Show me the, the craft. Show me this. Let me, and it's like, look, I get that you want that. I just said I'm doubting Thomas. But there comes a point where you have to say, well, testimony is real evidence.
Yeah.
And I find it ironic, by the way.
I know.
Let me be agnostic for a minute here.
Right.
That all these people who take an entire religion based on the testimony of people a couple thousand years ago find the testimony of current day guys who you can look into and find out their service records and everything else completely incredible. Like they just don't buy it at all.
Yeah.
But they believe in an entire religion that they base their life on eyewitness testimony. That's all we've got.
Right.
Exactly. And so it's like, at some level you have to treat seriously a lot of people are saying this is true.
Yeah, see, like that's why one of the ways in which I kind of lean into this story a little bit is that, I'm on the opposite side of the thing, sort of, right? And what I mean is that I'm very wide-eyed about the so-called evidence of things unseen, right? Like, I know, I have, my entire sort of belief structure is predicated on these things. My argument is not that. My argument is that the role that faith plays broadly and generally is under-indexed in the kind of hardcore materialist types, but also, interestingly enough, with the sort of the sort of the, I don't, what do you want to call them, Steve? The sort of the so-called true believer, right? And of which I call myself, a true believer, right? Or at least I try to. And the point here is that, the role of testimony We talked about this just the other day. We were talking about Australia, right? I've never been to Australia. I've seen pictures of Australia. I've heard accounts of people who've been to Australia, people that I know and that I don't know, and people who like them, and a bunch of people who all kind of sound the same, have a so-called Australian accent. On some level, I'm taking all of that on the credibility of an authoritative claim that I myself have been unable to verify. Now, I'm pretty confident that Australia exists, right? But in the day-to-day functioning of this, whatever this faith vector thing is, it plays a much larger role in the way that we go about our day-to-day business. And it really frustrates me both, for sort of the hardcore new atheist types and for these people, on my so-called my side of things, are just completely pretending like
God's talking to them every day and giving them the instructions for how to tie their shoes and go shopping at night. And it's like,
right. And so, so I lean into it from the faith side of things, but, my eyes are, wide open and I have to be very honest about these things. I mean, think about the testimonies of saints and think about the testimonies of history itself. I mean, you just got finished reading, the Nuremberg thing. Like, what is that? Well, it's something happened. Right. Something happened. And yes, I don't have an iPhone video of the Nuremberg, situation, but man, just simply pretending like, oh, that's like old dumb stuff. Like, you can't do that, but nor can you say like, look, Jimmy Carter of all people, I'm not exactly a huge Jimmy Carter fan, will come as no surprise to anybody, but you sort of credibly like sought out this intervention, to sort of find these things. And so again, all of this sort of stuff mounts together as some sort of larger thing that to simply nothing burger this thing is irresponsible. I actually think it's irresponsible.
You can't do it, and you absolutely should not do it on religious grounds. I think that's hypocritical in the extreme, but we'll get to that. So I'm gonna breeze through because I've eaten too much. No, it's good. I think it's actually really good. And by the way, you reminded me of a digression I do want to take for 1 second, which is again to go back to cognitive neuroscientist Donald Hoffman out at I think USC. This is the guy who basically has developed the theory that it is impossible mathematically that human beings evolved sensory apparatus that allow them to accurately perceive reality. Now, he's not in the UFO space at all. Right. He doesn't talk about any of that stuff. What he says is the way selection pressure works is it gets you to a place where you can survive, dominate, like look at sharks. I mean, sharks haven't evolved in 400 million years. They're at the top of the food chain. They don't need to do anything else. Yeah. Like they're good.
They've cracked the code, as it were.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, for their environment, they've cracked the code.
Right. And so we get to a point where we stop changing, stop adapting biologically in order to perceive more things, because in a way, we actually need to filter more things so that we can process the information we have. And, he gives examples, he says like, you're typing on your laptop. He's like, you're using an interface. You're pushing keys. You're not seeing the circuitry. You're not seeing the electrons moving through the circuitry. You're not seeing all the things that are happening that's allowing what you're interacting with to make something happen. You don't perceive any of that. And so what we have, our perceptual capabilities are essentially a virtual reality headset that allows us to see an interface of the world that is constructed of what we are capable of perceiving. And that really hit home for me. We're talking about Bigelow, we're talking about NIDS and Bass and the stuff that they investigated. I won't go into it in detail. I'll just tell you guys, if you want to read the most boring and simultaneously interesting book, read Skinwalkers at the Pentagon. I mean, it's written by a literal nuclear engineer and like a bioscientist.
Yeah.
And so it's just exhaustively textbook style. But all they do is go through all the investigations they did with NIDS and Bass at Skinwalker Ranch and all the weird shit that went on. I mean, I'm really talking weird, werewolves,
really weird stuff,
and poltergeist activity, and freaking orbs that would fly through people and then they get cancer, and like all this kind of crazy stuff. Prehistoric animals that don't exist anymore, just walking across in front of them, and they're like, "What was that?" And they go to try to chase it down, and it's gone. And then they go into fossil records and like, oh, that lived here 100,000 years ago. It doesn't live here now. Like just stuff that doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
Orbs that are flying through mountains and weird gamma ray signatures that are there some of the time and not other times, just over and over and over, all this stuff, right? I mean, the book opens with a story about hardcore military operators who were hired to do security on the ranch, and they're doing a patrol. Like their first night there, they can't walk down the road because they are getting more and more and more terrified with every step that they take. These are guys that have served in combat, like they're special forces guys.
These are not scaredy cats like
they
me.
all turn around and they're like, let's get the F out of here. Because something is wrong and we don't know what it is. And they see like some weird dark portal almost kind of thing. And they're like, what even is that? You know, like we weren't prepared for this.
Right.
You know,
right.
And so there's all this weird stuff that goes on there. So if you want to see sort of the intersection of the woo and the nuts and bolts and everything, Skinwalker Ranch is your game. The government invested millions of dollars into studying what was going on there. They never came away with anything conclusive that anybody knows about. Of course, they've been tight-lipped about what did come out. It's owned by a new guy now. There's a show. It's edited like reality TV, which throws a lot of people off. But they're doing real scientific investigations there. It's a fascinating place. So I'll leave that there. But that to me, the weird and the woo. But when you watch the show Skinwalker Ranch, one of the things that develops over time, coming back to Donald Hoffman and his headset theory, is they start seeing 10 times more UFOs when they start using thermal cameras. Like stuff is happening. Orbs are flying around. They can't see them. They get 4th generation night vision goggles for the helicopter. The pilot's like, there's orbs all around us. Like, what are you talking about?
Right.
He'd never seen them before until he put the night vision goggles on. You think about pit vipers can see heat, and bats can use echolocation, and there's infrasound. There's all these things that exist in the physical world that we can't perceive. So what if something is just phase shifted just far enough outside of our perception that it's going on around us all the time and we just don't even know?
Right. And it's as if it doesn't exist, right?
It's not like you see radiation. Like the guys that got killed at Chernobyl didn't see the radiation waves moving toward them. I mean,
right.
So we can't perceive everything that can physically interact with us. And that's an important thing to remember, because we're like, well, why don't we see more? Why don't we know more? Well, I don't know. Maybe because it's not in the spectrum of what we can perceive, you know? So that's important. So, okay, we're going to skip ahead. 2017 becomes the seminal year. This starts the clock for where we are now.
Right.
2017, the New York Times, Leslie Kean, Ralph Blumenthal, they published this article called Glowing Auras and Black Money. And I remember reading it. Like I remember, I think it came out in a Sunday edition, I think. My family and I had just gotten out of church and Jamie was in the store and I'm reading this thing and it's like, what?
Yeah, I'm sorry.
And it's this whole story
Excuse me, what?
about an exposed secret Pentagon UAP program, which was artificially revealed as ATIP, AATIP, which is the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program. That was actually, it is impossible to explain, and I've read the description a number of times. The actual acronym is AWSAP, which don't ask me to tell you what it all was. AAWSAP. But ATIP was the spin-off organization that they created that was not classified, so they could roll information from the classified program into the unclassified one so they could talk about it, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
It's almost like a shell company for classification systems. So everybody associates ATIP with it. It's not what it actually was. It was OSAP. That's pedantic, but be that as it may. With that article, they got 3 Navy videos declassified and released from the Pentagon. There was the gimbal, the go fast, the FLIR one, I think was the Tic Tac video, which was from the 2004 Nimitz encounter we talked about a little bit earlier, which was off the coast of San Diego. Major Top Gun pilot encounter with a UFO that could travel 60 miles in a matter of 2 seconds and just did physically impossible things. And David Fravor, by the way, not only went on Rogan and talked about this for 3 hours, but he went in front of Congress 2 years ago and testified under oath about what he saw and about how no physical craft in our inventory or in any other military's inventory that he is aware of as a top trained pilot can do any of the things that he saw.
Yeah, even
which
close.
Is a very, very interesting kind of testimony. And the guy's just a no bullshit, like literally Top Gun. Like he went through Top Gun training.
Maverick.
Okay, so
Iceman.
yeah, exactly. Fravor. I wonder what his call
Fravor.
sign was.
God, I bet it's cool. Yeah.
It's probably a good one, yeah. So anyway, they released these videos, which are the first declassified videos that we saw of anomalous aerial phenomenon. Like we just didn't know what they were. And then Luis Elizondo is introduced through this because he's the guy coming out as a whistleblower. He basically resigned in protest saying, we can't get the information to the public that the public deserves. So I'm leaving my job at the Pentagon and I'm coming out with this information and I'm going to start pushing for disclosure. Now, disclosure is this word that I feel like is kind of a catch-all, and I meant to define it at the beginning.
Yeah, go ahead. That's
disclosure is the idea. Well, there's several different kinds. There is let me scroll back up because I wrote this down and I want to make sure I don't miss any of them. Any day now, Steve, you could find your notes. I don't know. I misplaced it, but here we are. Okay, types of disclosure. Controlled, which is like a slow drip.
Yeah.
We find ways to get the narrative to the public. This could happen through media. This could happen through movies. This could happen through little releases that don't have all the information but have some. Could even come through whistleblowers that are designed to go out into the public.
Yeah.
Catastrophic disclosure, which is the opposite of that, like something forces this out. Whether a whistleblower, kills their NDAs and brings the smoking gun.
Who is it catastrophic for, Steve?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Well, I mean, I think it's a multiple constituent scenario, right? Okay. So one of the things that we're going to be talking about here in a minute is the fear of what revealing these things in an official capacity does to the populace, right? So disclosure could be catastrophic in multiple ways, but the idea of catastrophic disclosure, as I understand it, is it means it's happening not on our terms, our being the public policymakers who decide this kind of stuff. It's not happening on our terms, and it's happening in a way that will cause damage across the board. So probably to the military establishment, probably to the credibility of the government, probably to the confidence of the population, probably to a bunch of different things. Yeah. So for example, like if a UFO landed on the White House lawn, that would be a form of catastrophic disclosure. Like,
right. Because
hey, we've been here all along. You guys have been trying to keep it secret. We're tired of these games that we're playing, so we're just going to reveal ourselves. Like that would be catastrophic.
Right.
Because if it happens too fast, people aren't ready.
Yeah.
Across the board.
Yeah.
And then official
and they'll have the shock, right?
Yes.
And the existential flip, as it were. Yeah.
Ontological shock is the thing that everybody is afraid of, right? And so then you have official government disclosure, which is what Trump is promising, whether we get it or not.
Yeah.
The idea of we're going to sanitize this and we're going to release it officially. And we're going to let everybody know. And that way we can control how much comes out, what we keep secret, what stays redacted, et cetera. And so Elizondo comes out and he's like, the American people have a right to know this. They have a right to know that their airspace is being violated all the time and the U.S. military doesn't have an answer for it and it's a national security threat. Congress has a right to know that they are funding black programs that they know nothing about. There's no accountability. I mean, the Pentagon's never passed an audit. Amazing. There's all this money that's missing, trillions of dollars missing, and we don't know where it's gone. And it's like...
Mistakes were made.
Mistakes were made. Yeah.
We thought the House was going to come in at, $300,000, but yada, 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 $450 later. Hey, look, you have a house. Don't complain about it.
Yeah. $4 trillion later. Whatever.
With a T, by the way.
The conspiracy theorists love that, by the way, that like Donald Rumsfeld admitting that like $4 trillion was missing from the defense budget over a certain period of time. And the next day 9/11 happens or whatever that is. That's a fun story. We're not going to go down that road.
Oh, please, yeah.
All right. So this article in the New York Times opens the floodgates. And it's like there's been people involved all along. There will be people who see this and will be like, well, what about, X, Y, and Z? And it's like, yeah, you know what? I'm trying to give a top level. Yeah. There have been people pushing the whole time. There have been people telling their stories the whole time. In 2012, there was a press conference at the National Press Club in D.C. where all these old guys who used to serve as military officers at our nuclear Minuteman bases gave their testimonies about UFOs screwing with the nuclear bases and turning off the missiles and doing all this kind of stuff, and how they were warned never to tell anybody about it or terrible things would happen to them. And like, they're in their 80s now, and they're coming out and going, I haven't talked about this for 40 years. Like, I didn't even tell my wife, So there's been a push all along, but it just never lands. Like, it can't ever. You would think it would be a bigger deal and it would make more waves, but nobody hears about this stuff unless they go looking for it. Part of it's kind of like a media blackout. Part of it's just, there's no government reaction to any of it. Part of it is still the stigma that holds on of like, do you really believe this stuff? Part of it is just, who's going to watch like hours of freaking boring testimony to get to the nuggets, unless they're a complete and total nerd. And then those people try to present it to other people and they're like, what are you talking about, dude?
And that's a form of controlled disclosure unto itself, isn't it? Right? That there's just, if you can get a sizable chunk of people to just kind of shrug their shoulders and be like, what's on Netflix? Right? And I think that that's a part of this phenomenon. That there's just so much stuff out there. You don't know what to believe. Maybe some of it's believable. Maybe none of it's believable. Maybe all of it's believable. But you know what? I have so much going on that, until someone sits at the Oval Office desk and says, the thing, I'm just not going to pay attention to it.
And even then, let's be honest.
Yeah, right.
This stuff looks like it's coming out at a time where we've spent how many episodes talking about how you can't believe anything anymore?
Yeah, right. Totally.
Like, we are in the worst information environment for evidence to come out. Because how do you know that video is not AI? How do you know that photo isn't doctored? How do you know, and literally, unless I'm touching something, unless I'm in the room with it, there will be a level of skepticism that remains.
Because of the digital layer that you were talking about that penetrates to consciousness itself, right? I mean, we're all looking at things through an interface, right? Which is a kind of radical filter, interestingly enough.
Yeah. So for the last decade, 9 years, there's been just this whistleblower drumbeat, more and more guys coming out, military pilots, defense intelligence guys. Give you just a list of some of the people if you want to look them up. We'll put this list in the notes, but Lou Elizondo mentioned him. He headed up or was near the top of one of those UFO programs in the Pentagon. You have Jay Stratton, who formed the UAP task force. He's the guy who said, by the way, watch Age of Disclosure if you can. That documentary has everybody in it, except for Dave Grusch. Like, he's the only guy who should be in it who's not. But Jay Stratton says in Age of Disclosure that he has seen alien bodies with his own eyes. Like, I don't know what to do with that, right? You have Chris Mellon, who's a former Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Intelligence. I have to write that down every time. Because there's too many words there. But, first of all, he's part of the Mellon family, big, powerful American
MELLON people.
Like
Mellon.
Carnegie Mellon, but he is a key behind-the-scenes advocate. He helped to get those videos out that were declassified with the 2017 article. He's lobbied Congress for disclosure legislation. He's always doing the circuit. Very articulate, very well-informed, was very highly placed within the intelligence community, so he knows his stuff. Ryan Graves, Navy pilot, great guy to check out. He's, got some super interesting stories about how frequently pilots are encountering these things when they're doing training exercises. He says it's every day. It's every day. It's not once in a while. Dr. Eric Davis, physicist, worked on crash retrieval, worked with Bigelow, NIDS, all that stuff, has been tuned into this stuff for forever. His discussion with Eric Weinstein on Jesse Michaels' podcast, very interesting.
Really great, yeah.
David Fravor and Alex Dietrich, the two main pilots for the Tic Tac thing in 2004 off the Nimitz. Check out their stuff. They've both done media interviews. Matthew Brown, Rear Admiral Tim Gallaudet, I think it's Colonel Carl Nell, Dylan Borland, Jeff Nucatelli, Jake Barber, Michael Herrera. These are all military and intelligence guys who have come forward, given their testimonies. A lot of them have put themselves in really crappy situations by coming forward. Some of them have been threatened. Some of them have lost their jobs. And then journalists, George Knapp, Jeremy Corbell, Ross Coulthart, awesome guy out of Australia, very solid guy, brings gravitas to it. Michael Schellenberger covers this stuff, Jesse Michaels, Chris Ramsey. Like, there's so much good stuff going on. If you're interested, there are a lot of sources of information that you can go to. In Congress, the people to watch, Anna Paulina Luna, Tim Burchett, Jared Moskowitz, Eric Burleson, who right now is driving most of this, congressman out of Missouri. The Senate side, we've got Chuck Schumer, Mike Rounds, Kristen Gillibrand, Marco Rubio, Harold Malmgren, who recently died, but he was an advisor to 3 or 4 U.S. presidents, was an ambassador. He was brought in on all this stuff. He was involved in early nuclear testing. He saw UFOs with his own eyes. He did an interview with Jesse Michaels like a week before he died.
Wow.
And he said
I didn't see that.
He touched an alien artifact in a naval intelligence officer's office. It was claimed to be an alien artifact, and like all this information came into his brain. And
wow.
I mean, crazy, very credible guy, like extremely intelligent, high-ranking, trusted by multiple U.S. presidents. Not a kook, but just had some wild experiences. So there's a lot of people to look at out there, right? Okay, so all of this moves us. These are the people who've been we've been seeing stories about them over and over and over for the last 9 years. There's others. This is the main list I could come up with off the top of my head. Another interesting one, by the way, John Ratcliffe, who is the current director of the CIA. He said before, when he was he was the director of national intelligence. I think he had Tulsi Gabbard's job before.
Got it.
He said there are instances where we don't have good explanations for some of the things that we've seen. He said that on the news as director of national intelligence. Now he's director of the CIA. He's still pushing for disclosure. So this is all like this drumbeat of building pressure, which is why you hear about it now more, which is why it's on the news more. News stations are starting to cover this. News Nation was a new network that risked their neck on having Ross Coulthart, an Australian journalist of all things, doing investigative reports on this. His show blew up. Like they broke the Dave Grusch interview. They broke the Jake Barber interview. Like he's had a number of stories that he's broken, and they've gotten crazy traffic out of it because the American people are fascinated by this. Like they want to know what's going on. So this is how we get to this week.
Yeah.
Is all this stuff. Push, right? And so people who say, well, we've been hearing about this forever and it's always right around the corner. Why do you believe something's going to happen now? Well, because I think there's just more data points pointing to it happening now. Now, is it going to happen fully? Probably not. I don't believe we're going to get something fully satisfying. But if we cross the threshold of, yes, this is real from the American president, it's a pretty big deal.
Yeah. To say the least.
I think. And so now what you have is Trump said in February, hey, we're going to come out with this stuff, right? Let's start gathering the documents. And then the press pool has been good. They keep pushing Pete Hegseth. They're pushing, the people in Congress who are involved in this. Like, when are we going to see these documents? So I think it was today or yesterday, Kash Patel came out and said, we already delivered the first load of documents. We're just waiting for them to be released.
Right.
So, I mean, I would say that's imminent.
Tantalizing, yeah.
But something else happened in February. And this is why the Twitters are ablaze.
Yes.
And that is, well, should we first talk about the Collins elite?
Well, no.
Or should we introduce it the other way around?
Yeah, let's introduce it the other way around.
Okay, so there is this group of pastors who were
invited to an Airbnb in Tennessee.
In Tennessee. Yeah, I was looking to see if I had
no cell phones. It was like a kind of proto skiff of sorts, isn't it?
Skiff, as in secure contained information facility, secure classified.
An Airbnb.
Airbnb. Well, they didn't have their phones confiscated, and they weren't inside a Faraday cage. They just had to put them in airplane mode.
Right. That's
according to them. Which, by the way, intelligence guys will be like, your phone can be off. I can turn on your camera. I can listen to you.
LOL, as we would say. This is too good. All right, yeah. So they all come out. Basically, it just kind of surfaced.
Even before they come out, what do we have? We have Chad the Ripper. Father Chad Ripper is out there doing big podcasts. Tucker Carlson, Sean Ryan, talking about aliens being demons. I didn't watch either one. because he bugs me. Other people maybe watched it and can fill in. Did you watch any of the clips from that?
Just a couple of clips. I have a lowish tolerance for this guy.
Okay, so we're not gonna. But he was out there saying, "Hey, aliens or demons," right?
Yeah.
JD Vance said something along the same lines. His was more nuanced. Like, I feel like if he'd been given more context, he would have given a slightly different answer. But there's this feeling of like, since Trump said this is going to happen, we're getting a theological pushback on this. Now, for years, even when I was doing Catholic media and still fully like practicing, and if I would post, like I posted this New York Times article and people were like, it's demons. It's demons, and it's like, no, it's not. Like, stop. Just stop. There's different things going on here. There's woo. There's weird. We talked about Whitley Strieber. We talked about Skinwalker Ranch. There's creepy stuff here. Maybe some of it's demons.
Yeah.
I don't know. Like, I believe that there are malevolent, non-tangible entities in this world who are doing stuff. I've seen too much weird crap not to believe that. I mean, I worked for a guy who was an unofficial exorcist, and I saw people that he worked with, including a woman who was raised in a satanic cult. There was weird stuff going on, right? Like, I've seen that with my own eyes. But I don't believe this is that. I don't think it operates the same way. So, there's this crossover. There are spiritual events that happen in the realm of this stuff. Like, a lot of the abductions are weird. There are over 400 confirmed cases where someone used the name of Jesus and stopped an abduction from happening.
Right.
I don't know what to do with that. I mean, okay.
Yeah.
Like, is it just I'm saying no to you? I'm resisting with something I believe in, and that's enough? Is it this is actually a demonic entity that corresponds to that, and it's masquerading as something else? I don't know. I don't know.
Okay. So so in this recent round, these I think they're all Pentecostal.
Yeah. So this is why I'm asking these questions,
adjacent.
because I'm trying to get to those guys.
Yeah.
Because half a dozen of these guys, nobody knows yet who called them in, and they're being cagey about it, right?
Right.
But
government officials, I think,
some
is sort of
government officials,
loose.
right?
Yeah.
So the pastors received this briefing, and these are like mega church online televangelists, but they're dispensationalist guys. These are prophecy guys. These are guys who can't shut up about prophecy. I was trying to watch the video this morning, and they're talking about it so casually, like, "Oh, I was prophesying about this." No, you weren't. Stop.
Yeah.
It's just weird. Don't do that.
But that's their idiom.
No, I know.
Keep going. Keep going.
It's me.
It's okay.
Sorry. But there is something important in distinguishing them from Vance and Ripperger and anybody else who's talking about this from a more foundational theological perspective. These guys are pre-tribulation rapture guys. These are 7-year tribulation millennialists. Like, they believe that the UFO thing is kind of the setup for the Antichrist, right?
Right.
And so they have this meeting where they're briefed that something is coming. And they come out and they say, "Oh, it happened back in February." For some reason, they're all talking about it this week.
Like this week.
I can't find anything that says why they're talking about it now. Did somebody give them a timeline? None of them are talking about the timeline. They're just all talking about it. Like, a new one came out right before we started recording. Michael Signore or somebody like that. I've never heard of any of these guys before, so I don't really know how to evaluate them. So if I seem harsh,
it's not really our world.
No, it's not our world.
Yeah.
But so what they were told from at least one of the clips that's out there is that 95% of the stuff that's being classified as UFOs is reverse engineered technology that it's human now in U.S. airspace. I don't buy that. I do think that the vast majority of sightings are probably false positives. I think we have to apply a skeptical heuristic. It's super easy. Humans are not made to be able to gauge distance and size and all that stuff of things that are up in the air.
Well, I remember the first time I saw Earthlink satellites in early
Starlink. You keep doing Earthlink, your old email provider.
Sorry, yeah. The Starlink, sorry. I remember the first morning, it was like 5:30 in the morning. It was pitch black. It was in the middle of the winter. And I saw this squadron of Starlink, like 6, 7, 8 in a row. And they're just sort of shooting through the sky. I can see it with my naked eye. And I remember the first time I saw that, it's like, what? Like, what is this? Like,
have you ever seen a Falcon 9 rocket?
Yes. And in fact,
those are even crazier. It's like some kind of space whale.
It's
or
like right there.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's crazy.
It has this weird aura around it, and it's like
And so anyway, so in other words, like with the naked eye, like it's just such a weird thing to experience that it's like, all right, how do I file this? Like, what does it even make? And of course, you learn to make sense of it. But still, anyway, I'm derailing you.
No, it's fine, because I think that this is we're trying to figure out how do we bridge this gap between what it is that is prosaic and quotidian for us. Every day, like, how do we process, we live in this world of practical things, of physical senses, of reason, and then we have to deal with something that's outside of our framework and outside of our category, and it's intruding in a way that we're like, I don't know what to do with that.
Yeah.
And I don't have time, because I got too much else going on, to spend all day, every day trying to dig into it, only to not get answers about it. So we don't have a place to file it. And things like what you're talking about, like, that's important. It's an important experience to have, to be like, I saw this thing and I thought it was weird, and it actually wasn't.
Yeah.
That means I need to check myself every time.
That's right. Every time
I encounter something like that. So, but they also say that that 5% of whatever's going on up there is real. And I don't know if this is their interpretation or what they were told. They said fallen angels and, demonic stuff, right? So I'm assuming that's in their interpretation. They were shown images of creatures, which they described as startling. I don't have any more information than that, because they didn't say more than that. They expect that the disclosure narrative will be as follows. Jesus was a spirit or an enlightened being or one of these star people, not actually the Son of God, all this kind of stuff, right?
Yeah.
So, like, it's going to be this retconning of the Christian narrative in order to lead people astray. They think that people are being geared up for the great deception from 2 Thessalonians. They're not, they're going to be like, well, you're close. Your religious beliefs are close, but that's not really what happened. It's more prosaic. Maybe humans were designed and all this kind of stuff, which, this has definitely been part of the UFO conversation for a long time. There's not anything new here. A lot of people think that stuff who don't believe in traditional religion, but it is important. And I want to turn it over to you, but it's important to understand, like, people are like, why these guys and why not Catholic bishops or Catholic priests or whatever? Their eschatology is primed for this.
Yes.
These prophecy, end times, rapture. The UFOs is going to create the one world government that's going to bring in the Antichrist, all this stuff. This is what they are made for, and they've got big-ish YouTube audiences. The one guy, I was looking at his video today, he's got 123,000 subscribers. I mean, we don't even have 500. Like, these guys have a lot of influence, and they look like they're doing well. They're wearing nice clothes. They have fancy teeth. I don't have fancy. I have
that'd
like
be nice.
partial Invisalign stuff going on. So it's like, I think it matters to discuss that aspect, and then we talk about the Collins elite.
Right. So that was my immediate question. Like, okay, so they're talking to these pastors, these Pentecostal megachurch adjacent pastors in Tennessee. And, my immediate reaction was like, well, has anybody said anything to, like, the Catholic bishops or the Orthodox, hierarchy? Like, anything? Nothing? It's just such a weirdly specific group of people that were contacted, and they seem to be coordinated in this disclosure of sorts just yesterday. So, I did a little sniffing around. I have my brother, as you know, is a priest, and I asked him, hey, Josh, did anybody from the chancery, have y'all talked about this at all? And he's like, what are you talking about? No, like,
right.
Total radio silence. So to me, that raises an eyebrow, to say the least, which as soon as I got that data point, I thought of the Collins elite. All right. So who is this alleged group called the Collins elite, and how does this fit into the UAP mythology?
So this is the weirdest, but also somehow most plausible thing that's mixed in with all of this. It's not an official faction. So let's say this: if it hasn't become clear through the discussion, there are factions within the government that are working against each other over this. Either that or it's the most elaborate psyop ever made that is expensive and 80 years long. And
the parsimonious interpretation is that there are a bunch of different groups who want different things, all operating. We make jokes about the blob, right? And I think it's important to remember that the nature of a blob, I even tweeted about this just, earlier this morning, is like a blob is not hierarchical. A blob is, I'm going to sound ridiculous and pedantic, but it is rhizomatic. In other words, it's much more like a potato, right? In terms of the way that the rhizome, it's a patterned construction that is non-hierarchical, right? And postmodern theorists sort of have a field day with this, Deleuze and Guattari and these other people. But the idea is that you've got all these these competing things in the blob, and they're not working necessarily in concert, right? Do you know what I'm saying?
I do. I was just making faces at you because
I'm sorry. But
expounding upon the blob.
Yeah, the blob is non-hierarchical, and therefore I think it's really unlikely that this is some elaborate psyop with a sort of a central figure directing, what's the guy in the Truman Show?
I never remember his name, but yeah.
It's not like that. It's much more, it's competing, they're working with and for and against each other. And so I think a lot of the noise, as we would say, right? A lot of the noise is because you have certain people that want certain things and different things. And, that's why, somebody like Trump is such an interesting character in all of this, because he's just such a wrecking ball. We always joke about, no, he's not playing 4D chess, right? You can like Trump or hate Trump, but to suggest that he's playing 4D chess is finding structure in sort of a chaotic approach to things that just simply isn't there, right?
I don't know that I fully agree with that.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, go ahead.
And actually, our unofficial mascot of the program, Walter Kern,
Uncle Jesse,
has been talking about this lately, and he's like, Trump is actually a lot smarter than people think.
No.
He was using the chess thing. He was like, we had a back and forth where I was like, well, it's either that or he's the luckiest son of a bitch that ever lived, because things always go the way that he seems to want them to go, one way or the other.
That's fair. I guess what I'm really specifically talking about this group of Pentecostal pastors that have been.
But I mean, so we have to step back for a second and say that presidents, you and I have talked about this on other shows, but presidents are not treated by whatever cabal. I mean, we all have this nomenclature about the deep state and the swamp and all this stuff. Like, the deepest of the deep state would be the kind of guys who have been controlling this stuff since the Manhattan Project, which is really where its origins in secrecy and compartmentalization come from. The Manhattan Project guys. They were involved in the earliest stages of this stuff, according to Grusch. And they mapped that exact protocol onto how to handle this, right?
Right.
And so presidents are treated like, you don't need to know. You're a temporary employee. You're here
short
for
timers.
8 years at most, 4 years probably. And if we bring you in on this, then you can introduce a whole world of problems for us. So unless you need to be read in, we're just not going to mention it to you.
Yeah, which should be pretty disturbing to people.
It should be. It should be.
So the blob, is operating sort of extra electorally, right? They're the long timers, and I've said this before. I'm going to say it again because I really truly believe it. But the model of the Manhattan Project is the model of modern, quote unquote, governance in the United States of America since it was successful in the Trinity explosion, right? All that stuff that led up to it, the kind of secrecy, the funding, the structures, the sources, the compartmentalizations, putting everybody in one place. That is the model of the way things work.
Even burying information in so much classified data files that you couldn't find it if you wanted to.
Right. And so it makes you sort of think and see, at least for me, I'll speak for myself. You can chime in how you want, that really what happens in Congress, in the House of Representatives and the Senate and the executive branch, is kind of just theater in an interesting sort of way. Yeah, they do things and they're of consequence. I'm not totally dismissing that, but all of these things that we're talking about right now seem to operate outside of the stated structure as laid out in the Constitution of the United States of America. It's its own thing. And it's like it is sort of skin suited the Constitution, and its various branches of government sort of to do its own thing because, reasons, right?
I mean, there are, it would be another episode, but there are, I think, arguments to be made that the technological progress of the human race has changed the game of governance to such a degree that I favor a constitutionalist view. But the framers just did not have the capacity to foresee the challenges that presidents and congressmen and Supreme Court justices would be in intelligence agencies, which didn't even really exist in the same way back then, would be dealing with 250 years later.
Right. And how could they, right? I mean, this is not a slap against the founding fathers. I think both of us have a healthy respect and esteem for what they've created. I'm not trying to make some sort of argument. Let's just, blow it up. But in other words, I've oftentimes thought of it as like the dragon that was summoned in order to destroy the Axis powers in the Second World War were so powerful that we pretended that we put the dragon back in its lair, but it is the functional power and authority of whatever this sort of system we live in.
I mean, the dragon is so powerful, you're not allowed under law to describe it in detail.
Right.
Or, it's a federal crime.
Right, because you violate classified information, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? So, and I would say this too, and this is like hunch level stuff, Steve, is that, when you summon something more powerful than you, again, I'm speaking basically
this is such
here,
a good analogy. No, keep going.
That even if you wanted to put it to bed, you couldn't. Right. And, look, this dovetails with the stuff that you and I have talked about with with Chaos, the book that both of us love. What has this dragon actually been responsible for when we get an official story? And then there seems to be like this real story that we can't quite put our finger on. And so all of these whistleblowers, all of these projects, all of these things seem to be much more akin to or in bed with this dragon than with the government.
Yes, we started dealing with forces outside of our control, cosmic forces, fundamental forces of the universe.
Right.
And in so doing,
I mean,
Steve, we had to invent a paradigm for gatekeeping.
Yeah. I mean, Steve,
whatever is on the other side of that barrier.
We split the frickin' atom. I mean, just like staying with that just for a minute, like, holy crap, like that's incredible. And then we can kind of sort of control it.
In the 40s.
Yeah, in the 40s, right.
Look at 40s technology. It's crazy that we pulled that off.
I mean, the digital literally didn't exist yet, essentially.
But I mean, I think this is a great analogy to make because it really sets up how do we explain the Collins elite? They're the people who are afraid that the dragon is the literal dragon from the book of Revelation. They are afraid, not nuclear, but but if we're mapping the dragon onto UFOs and non-human intelligences and all this kind of stuff. So they feel like this is not what the whistleblowers claim that it is. It's not what the scientists are saying that it is. They think the Collins elite is an unofficial cabal, for lack of a better term. It's not the deep state guys who are
fundamentalist Christians.
Christians primarily, scientists, some physicists, some intelligence officers, some military guys, probably mostly, inside the U.S. government complex, whose core belief is that UAPs and NHIs are not extraterrestrial. They are demonic in nature. And maybe interdimensional, but to them, that's not a distinction that's relevant.
Right.
And they are designed by the devil to erode the Christian faith, alter the Christian message, promote occult and transhumanist ideas, harvest souls, set the stage for the one world religion and the Antichrist and the end times.
Right. And look, insofar as that is possible, I too would have deep concerns about that. Just so everybody in the
Like, if
audience
you
is
thought
clear.
we were in control of that
Y-
stuff.
yeah, and
I mean, that's part of the problem, right? Is
right,
that they
right,
think that they're in control. I mean,
right.
part of the reason why there's such a huge, and I don't want to go down that's rabbit hole, but like this massive backlash against the idea of Zionism comes from their eschatological views of what they have to do in the Middle East to bring about the second coming of Christ. Like, it's the same kind of groups of people.
Yeah.
They
And
think
so,
that we're the ones determining how the end of the world happens. And
right. So if you recall, Steve, one of the things, I sent you a meme earlier today, and it's the image from Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, in which there's a brotherhood.
the brothers of the cruciform sword
Right.
have protected the Grail for 1,200 years.
Yeah. And we're not going to let some short timer ham and egger come and disclose this to the world. Now, look, it works in terms of the story, and we're talking about, the cup of Christ at the Last Supper and all of those kinds of things, right?
But it's the same thing.
Right.
Literally.
Yeah.
It's a secret brotherhood of guys who believe that the power of the Grail should not be entrusted to the average human because it's going to bring about, terrible things to the world. Right.
So I don't want terrible things to be unleashed into the world. You don't want terrible things to be unleashed into the world, right? So anyway, what I always get snagged up with the Collins elite, right, is if it's even a thing, apparently it is, there's a lot of, again, anecdotal evidence, to suggest that there is this group, and it's.
And by the way, we didn't get to what they're doing. They're trying to stop this stuff from coming out.
Right.
That's important to mention.
Yeah. Right.
Because people are like, okay, you said what they were, but what are they about?
Yeah.
Well, they're trying to stop any of this stuff from coming out.
Right. So then, like, what's the end game there?
Like, with this specific action that they're doing now?
Or no, just generally, like, if you're a member of the Collins elite, like, what do you think's going to happen? Like, can we just, like, again, I'm positing all of these what ifs and what ifs and what ifs, but like, if all of it is true, like, what do you hope do you really think that you can just contain this?
I think they have arrogated to themselves the power of the catacomb.
Woo!
They have determined, they have probably told themselves that God called them to.
Right.
Because they always think they're talking to him and that they're hearing what he's saying, that they have been called to hold back the Armageddon and the reign of the Antichrist, right? That's the role of the catacomb, right? We don't
forever and ever, amen, or like what? I mean,
I don't know. I don't know because again, it's not like you can like go to their office and interview them.
Yeah.
Nobody even knows who they are. I mean, Lou Elizondo said that he definitely ran up against them when he was working in the Pentagon and realized that they were making faith-based decisions around policies that should not have been faith-based. They should have been tactical. They should have been strategic. And so, they are trying to actively discourage this information from coming out, from it being studied, from it being known, because they think that the more attention that's given to it, the more the deception grows.
Right.
I mean, and the term, by the way, comes from this book. It's a novel.
Yeah.
The 2010 novel by a guy named Nick Redfern called Final Events. I've never read it, but he was the one who coined the term. And then it starts to show up more and more in other UFO books because everybody's like, well, yeah, this basically exists and we might as well call it that.
Call it a name, right? It's a tag, it's a helpful tag, right? To give it, to make it gives it a body.
So my theory, I don't know if we're ready to go there,
go
but
ahead,
my theory is these pastors who got this information, they didn't get this information because, they're the best people to handle this message or to prepare the public for this.
Because they're not.
No, they got the message because they are the opposite of that.
That's right.
They got the message unofficially. This was not, again, my view, this was not orchestrated by the administration or any of the people in Congress who are trying to make this happen. This was something that was done by, if I'm guessing, members of the Collins elite who are like, how do we get ahead of this story since Trump is now actively moving to get this stuff out so that we can poison the well before the story comes out?
Yeah.
Because if all these guys are saying it's a deception, it's going to try to ruin your faith, it's going to try to bring about the Antichrist and the apocalypse and all this kind of stuff. And I mean, look at the play that they're already getting. I have never followed any of these guys.
Yeah.
I don't know anything about them. They are all that's in my feed for the last 2 days.
Yeah. Same.
It's like they have resonance.
So-
And there are conspiracies that people have believed in for years. Like, I don't even understand what the hell Project Bluebeam is. People talk about it all the time. It's supposed to be some holographic fake alien invasion, one world religion tech deception that is like being perpetrated by the government or the people behind the government. I don't even know.
Right, but you can see why the environment, you can posit that the environment, that the information environment that we're existing in right now is sort of perfectly primed for these kind of wild stories that you can sort of hide things in plain sight because it's so wild, it's so off,
Look, I mean, there's no good way to go into everything that's happened since COVID. But
right.
people on the right went crazy. They went crazy.
Yeah.
And there were good reasons to be upset, but they took things way too far. And
Right,
I
it's
have
like-
people replying to me every day about, how the vaccine sterilized all their kids and all the and it's stuff that they can't prove. And it's like, I mean, remember like at the beginning of COVID, all the people were saying that 5G cell towers were going to activate the virus. And there's just the loss of trust in experts and institutions has translated into I'll believe anything as long as it's against the people I don't like.
Yeah, right. And that's a real, and that's just going to really muddy this whole situation, Steve. I mean, I don't have to tell you that. I'm just kind of saying it out loud.
No, say it to me.
It's worth
for the benefit
saying.
of everybody that we're talking
Well,
to.
I mean, I think that the information environment is so poisoned because our authorities have behaved poorly. And sadly, our ability to discern signal in this information environment is directly downstream from the shenanigans that people in charge played. I mean, just say the name Fauci, right? I mean, it's like we have it now clearly and on record, like that dude was up to no good.
Right.
I don't pretend to know why. I don't know any of these things, but it's like it's just straight out lies. And it seems it was about control, and it was about sort of, is it a test run for something else? I mean, I have to say that like part of me actually believes that stuff because of all the ways in which we got lied and coerced and shut down and all those things. And it's given so much fuel to some fires that are burning righteously. You know what I mean?
Well, our tendency to polarize over this stuff has really been exacerbated, maybe even exploited intentionally. I don't know.
Right.
But it's I was thinking about this because I posted something skeptical of somebody in the UFO world or whatever. And somebody asked me something about immediately I start getting responses that are skeptical, right? And I don't remember exactly what the context was, but I had this conversation of like, the reason I don't post this stuff is not because I'm not skeptical. It's because I don't want an army of people now like, well, you said this, and so now you're this. Like, I don't need the polarization. So what I do is I allow other people to make those criticisms about that and other topics. I don't want to be in the middle of those topics because then you get pegged as being on one side or the other.
That's right.
And you can't think anymore. You can't speculate. You can't have discussions that are honest because then you're betraying something if you have nuance or if you're like, nah, I agree with this, but not with that. And it makes it impossible for any of us to talk about anything.
Right. It's like, how do you navigate in the midst of a hurricane? It's like, it's impossible. The hurricane is bigger than you are. It's more powerful than you are. It throws any capacities you have to sail and navigate through something like that are shut down by the very power and size and scope of the hurricane.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel in a very real way that we're in the midst of this kind of hurricane, and it's really easy then to retreat back to it's all demons.
Yeah.
Right?
It's all conspiracy. It's all distraction from something else.
Right. And that's always the classic, like, it's a distraction. It's a distraction. Well, then, like, by the way in which you wield that particular weapon, then, like, what is it? Like, what is the real thing that we're all being distracted from?
You'll never get to the bottom of the Tootsie Roll Tootsie Pop. How many licks?
Right.
Do
we don't know. Take?
Yeah.
Nobody knows.
Nobody knows. Just crunch right on to, it's a distraction.
Right. And so, so sort of to cut to the chase, I guess, a little bit here is that, like, I don't know what's actually going on. but I know that it's not a nothing burger, but I also know that it's probably way more complicated than any of us can grok. And therefore, I am looking at it like a story. I'm looking at it like it's some kind of strange competition. And at the end of the day, the 6 or 7 pastors that have been carted out for this episode of the Truman Show are poisoned in my imagination, because it's like they wouldn't be the guys who
No.
would be able to move the needle exactly.
If look, they're Stalin's useful idiots, right?
Yeah, that's what I'm getting at.
You know, they're being used to move an agenda piece because they're predictable. Like, they knew exactly how they were going to react. They knew exactly that they were going to go out and start warning everybody and getting everybody all fired up to resist this. And all it's going to do is create dissension and chaos and discord. And I don't, like, when this really comes out, those people are going to be unbearable. Not the pastors, all the people that follow them. You work in a school.
I work in a school. Yeah, right. Thank you. Practice just got let out. So
yeah, they were agreeing with me. You know.
Yeah, right. Yeah, Steve.
But I mean, this is it's going to make navigating this information landscape unbearable, and it's going to make the truth that much harder to get to. And so, when you ask the question, which is what you should always ask, who benefits, right?
Yeah, cui bono, cui bono. Yeah.
And who benefits are the Collins elite. So that's who I think is behind this. Now,
look, I'll make
Burleson,
a prediction. We're going to have competing activated agents from other teams.
Red team on red team kind of stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, that seems plausible, right? Look, X-Files was way ahead of its time.
Totally.
Because they nailed this whole, like, there's factions in the government that are trying to help you. There's factions that are trying to stop you. There's factions that are serving their own ends. Everybody's working at cross purposes. Sometimes the people who are the most trustworthy are also the ones leading you down the wrong road on purpose.
Right.
Psyops within psyops, which is entertaining until it's not.
Right. Because you're in the middle of it. You're like, wait a second.
Because for those of us who just want to get to an understanding of, look, we've seen enough. We know something's going on. It's not a nothing burger. Help us get to the real truth, or as much of it as we're ever going to be given access to. Because again, the dragon, right? Like the power that is here. I mean, look, this is what Bob Lazar, in all of his most recent interviews, as a man who's in his 60s now, he's talking about his great regret is that he came forward at all because it excluded him from finding out how this works. And all he wants to know is, what did we figure out in the last 35 years? Because I freaked and I cut myself out of the most interesting project I was ever going to work on. And now I'm stuck in my little lab in Colorado on my horse farm trying to replicate experiments I don't have the materials, I don't have the stuff, but I'm trying to figure out what it was that I saw back then, because it's still haunting me now. And the only reason he ever says he's glad he came forward is because he believes the public has a right to know that this stuff exists, that the technology would change the world. I mean, I've been watching Landman, which is a very interesting show. If you've never seen it, it's Billy Bob Thornton's the main guy, and he's like the fixer for an independent oil company out in Midland, Texas. It's all about the oil industry and the lives of the people who work it, and the corporate level down to the roughnecks that are out working the rigs. But he has a couple of really interesting kind of diatribes about how oil is the thing that the entire world is dependent upon.
Sure.
And he's like, it's the worst job in the world trying to get it out of the ground. We don't pump it because we like it. We pump it because nobody will stop demanding it.
Right.
We do it because we haven't found another choice, and we're going to run out of it before we find an alternative to it. But if you think clean energy or green energy or any of those things are going to replace it, he's like, Exxon would be the first ones building windmills.
Right.
They're not, because it doesn't work. The costs are too high. The investment, like the carbon footprint is huge. Like, these things are fake. Lazar is like, they're using some element and a mini cyclotron to create forces we've never seen at energy levels that are off the charts. Like, this would change everything. You know, how are they producing these forces? It would change the
Yeah.
world.
And that's the part that I find incredibly intriguing, right? You know, because the other dragon in the room, the other pink dragon in the room is AI, and I don't quite know how I can map these things together, but my instincts, my intuition tell me that this is sort of part of a story hiding in plain sight. And I
The
don't.
pastors are talking about a connection between AI and aliens, and I didn't get that far.
Okay, I should look that.
They mentioned it, but I didn't get to dig into it, and I don't know what they think the connection is. Maybe
That's
we could
interesting.
I was hoping maybe you knew.
No, I'm sorry. No, I must plead ignorance.
We'll get some people in the comments. Comments, people, tell us what they said.
Until next episode, but my point is that, it functions as a again, something that is so potentially powerful that what would it even mean to control it? Right. So it's operating in that same symbolic space in my head.
The first one to ASI rules the world. The
right.
first one to master UFO
Right.
technology rules the world, right?
Right.
Combine them. I mean, guaranteed they're, if they have these crashed materials, AI is on the case already. Right. Trying to figure out what it is and how it works and doing metallurgical analysis and looking for patterns and trying
that
to
we
understand.
can't see because we don't have the brain compute, so to speak, to do it. No, I know. Which again makes the achievement at Los Alamos all the more staggering and impressive. That they did this before computers. I mean,
It's crazy.
It's crazy. Yeah. And so I don't know where that leaves us exactly. But I again on that hunch level. The very idea of sovereignty depends upon controlled violence. What happens when you have potential UAPs and NHI and AI and ASI? You have all these things that would render every conceivable system that you and I can cook up, looking at the historical record, almost hilariously inept, if it weren't so serious. Hilarious, like scary, haha. Hilariously inept, right? To deal with these summoned powers.
Like, I don't know how many people we've lost at this point. We're 2 hours and 15 minutes in, but I tell you what, these two things together, AI and UAPs, have the capacity to break the collective human consciousness. I mean, we are not ready for this. Last week or over the weekend or whatever it was, Richard Dawkins does this thing where he has an experience with Claude, and he's like, if this isn't consciousness, then what is? And people misunderstood him. He wasn't like he said, I was moved to expostulate. If you're not conscious, then I don't know what bloody well is, or something like that, where it looks like he's claiming that it's conscious. But if you read the whole piece, what he's saying is the level of competence being displayed by these machines, which are arguably not conscious, obviates why consciousness was something we evolved to have in the first place. Again, Dawkins is an evolutionary biologist, so take it from his frame, but he's like, we thought we evolved this in order to display competence. But these zombies, if you want to call them that, are displaying a level of competence that is above ours. So if they're not conscious, what is consciousness and what is it even for?
Right. And, again, this is gut hunch. I haven't spent enough time really chewing on this in a proper way. So I'm offering this, but because I think that, the category era that Dawkins makes is very understandable, given his background and given his genius in his area of mastery and domain. But the missing component for me, and maybe here I'm outing myself as what I really am, is, the missing component is that consciousness is not for compute. Consciousness is ultimately for connection, which leads me to conclude that consciousness, or whatever we're calling consciousness, is really for love, right? And connection. And here I would add in this kind of way that, with it, contemplation, right? That as Joseph Pieper says in Leisure, the Basis of Culture, it's like the final end of man is not thinking. The final end of man is contemplation. And there's an important, like, kind of distinction there to be made. And that doesn't mean that we can't think. We can. It doesn't mean we can't compute. We can. But as you yourself just mentioned with Dawkins, like, we already now have machines that we have made that are better at doing both of those things, in certain confined ways, and maybe it'll expand out, probably so. But what the robot, so to speak, can't do is love me. What the robot can't do is that it can run an analysis of me, Kale Zeldin, but it can't love me. It might be able to fake it, and I think, like, people can be fooled by such
also,
things.
I mean,
yeah, go ahead.
I hate to say this, but if the definition of love we want to go by is, St. Thomas or whatever,
Yeah.
seeking the highest good of the other, right? I bet a robot's going to be a lot better at doing that than a lot of people are.
Right.
It's not going to be driven by agape or phileto or eros or, but if the goal is, I will seek your highest good at all times, it will be more faithful to that than the vast majority of humans will be, which is an interesting thing, because I love what you're saying.
Yeah. No, and I track with what you're saying too. I guess the caveat, or the, sort of the nuances a little bit. It's like, the libido dominandi versus, self-sacrificial love, which reminds me, I have not yet seen Project Hail Mary, which means I probably should see it, because it probably is, there's some overlap here. But, like, the idea that, again, in the context of Dawkins playing with Claudia, and being moved by it and all that, in his question about consciousness, I take you for what you're saying, and I applaud you for sort of zeroing in on that aspect of his experiment, because a lot of people just immediately jump to their priors, and either you love Dawkins and therefore it was amazing, or you hated Dawkins and therefore
I've never defended
terrible.
him in my life.
No, like, literally, I know you. I've known you for a long time.
I think the reactions are the more important thing, and the reason I brought it up.
Yeah.
But the reason I brought it up in the context of this episode, and I don't want to derail your thought if you want to finish it.
No, bad.
But it's the way people are reacting to Dawkins is 100% their priors.
Yeah. Right.
There is no room for, he made an interesting point. That's something we should think about more and talk about more. It's either, hey, Dawkins is brilliant, I love him, this was great. Or it's, that old fool. He doesn't think
geezer,
God is real, and he thinks that Claude is.
Yeah.
Like, and that's it. Like, that's the spectrum of reactions. And it's like, no, he's asking something important about what makes us human, what distinguishes us from this machine.
But the fact that he's going to be categorically hindered, stopped, blocked from my perspective, the deeper question suggests to me that his game is the sort of the logical end game of Descartes' pronouncement that we have to become masters and possessors of nature. That's the sort of our proper end is domination, power, essentially. And I don't buy it. Ultimately, I get power's real, and I certainly would like to have a little myself, I suppose. But
Nice.
but
would be nice.
It would be nice. I mean, it would be nice. But in other words, there's a playing out of that logic which ends in AI, right? I mean, and to me, what's lacking in that vision is that I don't think that that's the proper end of man. And people are going to spend a lot of money and time trying to beat all the things that we know we can't beat, which is our own mortality. But not even that. I think that we're probably going to be able to extend life. Like, I don't know why somebody wants to live 200 years, but whatever, maybe it's just me, but it still sidesteps the ultimate question. And I believe, with every sort of fiber of my being, again, I'm using the word believe there because I have to, but that's fine. I'm very comfortable with that. I believe that the proper end is for me to love and be loved. And, that's hard, as both of us know. And it's frustrating, as both of us know. But it's not domination. It's not functional. You know what I mean? It's not functional, right? That the end has to be something beyond mastery of the immanent frame.
So what you're saying is important, but because of the scope of what we've covered, I want to pin that and come back to it.
Go ahead. Yeah, that's fine.
Because to me, the reason that I brought up the Dawkins thing and the AI and the reactions is because the same thing, but worse, will happen when disclosure happens,
okay.
Assuming that it does, right?
Yeah.
People will decide before it happens, and this move by these pastors was designed to accomplish that this is either a bad thing or a good thing, and they will come at it hard, and they will not try to understand it, and it will cause more problems than not. And I don't know what even should be done about it or who could do anything about it. But these two things side by side stand to disrupt our entire sense of our place in the universe, our place in the food chain, our place in the cosmological order, our place in the created order, if you're religious or if you're not.
Right.
I mean, I see reactions all over the spectrum of, I'm religious, this doesn't bother me at all. If there's aliens, hey, cool, God made them too, right? Reasonable. But then there's a ton of people who are like, no, because the Bible says this and the catechism says this and da-da-da-da-da. And it doesn't have to be Catholics. I mean, they're not always quoting sacrum. Sometimes it's just the Bible, right?
That's right.
That will forever be my default.
Yes. Yeah. I know. I forgot
Thank
that.
you.
Yeah, we
credit to you. You should get royalties if we ever make money off that.
I know.
But the point is, though, is that this is where the ontological rupture happens. We thought we were this, and it turns out that we're not unique. We are not the unique, conscious, embodied, biological beings that we thought we were. Would be the bare minimum thing if this is true.
But again, then that just exposes so many Christians as being, at the end of the day, and I don't mean this theologically, but I do. That just exposes that most Christians are essentially just modernists. They're materialists at the end of the day.
How do you figure?
Well, we already know. I mean, again, I'm speaking here as a Catholic. We already know that we're not exactly the top of the food chain, right? There's
the other story is told.
Keep going.
Well, I mean, we didn't, probably for the best, delve in at all into, the 9 choirs of angels and the fallen angels and the war in heaven and all this kind of stuff, right? There's a lot of things that we don't really know about that story, but we claim we know. I mean, one of the biggest reasons I get annoyed with Ripperger is because he acts like he knows more than he can possibly know about the supernatural realm, and he states it with a level of confidence that is impossible to attain unless you're getting your intel from them, which, considering who he's dealing with primarily, is probably not a good idea.
Good point. I mean, that's a very good point. I've thought that many times. It's like, you might be listening to these things too closely.
Yeah, but, like you think you're compelling them to tell you the truth, but they're smarter than you.
Yeah. Right. Like, what would it mean to be able to control a demon? I mean, like, come on. You know what I mean?
Like, when I hear him saying, I was beating him up, and I'm like, no, no, stop.
Right.
Anyway, but the point is that their story is part of our mythology, right? Like, in every culture has always believed in demons, not all believed in aliens, but there was always a sense of there being malevolent spirits that are not equivalent to the divine.
Right.
Harass and hinder human beings. I mean, it's a very well established understanding, right?
Mm-hmm.
But we don't have any context for there being another race of intelligent biological entities, another race of intangible, interdimensional entities. Like, we don't have that within our mythology. And so the religious people who are like, you know what? I've read the Bible cover to cover.
Mhm.
You know, and these pastors are trying to make it like, well, the Bible talks a lot about these non-human entities, you know, and it's like, okay, yeah, you're talking about Nephilim, which nobody knows what the hell they really
Yeah.
are.
Yeah.
You're talking about angels and demons. You
Mhm.
know, that's it. Like, there's nothing else. Like, the Bible just talks about things that are within that cosmology.
The frame,
and that's
yeah,
it,
the frame,
right?
yeah, yeah. No, I
And
get
so
that.
it's like, we don't have context for this. Now, in their mind, that's what justifies, oh, they're demons, right?
Mhm, mhm.
Because it's not talking about anything else, so
Yeah,
it's
but
got to be them, right? And
But
so it's
my
like,
experience with fundamentalists and evangelicals and even like pretty sharp ones, right? I'm not just talking about the kind of the the strip mall charismatic church types,
right,
right?
right.
You know, and this is true of Protestants much more so than Catholics, although there are certainly analogs in Catholic world too. But they simply don't. They believe that miracles stopped at the death of the last apostle. It's called cessationism or something like this. And I remember the first time I encountered that, I was just like, "Oh, wait, what?" And
It's
if you look at
interesting.
if you look at the history of the Reformations, um, you know, you have all of this weird stuff that happens in the 16th century. I mean, really wild stuff. And
Like the Nuremberg UFO. I mean,
right, and flying saints and
yeah.
bilocations and all that sort of stuff. The book to read, of course, is Carlos Ayers' They Flew. And when I talk to my pretty sharp evangelical friends about it, they just simply they have such a hard time positing it as anything but demonic.
Yeah.
And
But it's a framework problem.
right. No.
Like,
I
because you're
get
right.
it.
I'm making fun of the people who are just being simplistic here.
Yeah.
But
No.
you're 100% correct, and I don't mean to demean in any way your
No, I know
sharp
that.
evangelical friends. No, but
Yeah.
I want them to know that.
Yeah.
I'm frustrated because I feel like this has been distilled down to a Jack Chick tract, and I don't.
Well, yeah, but you're right. No, that's funny. But in other words, so much of modern Christianity, small m modern Christianity, like we're all like, I'm a Christian, I'm a modern Christian, right? So
Sure.
but so much of modern Christianity has cozied up with, the modernist frame, right? The eminent frame that this is all there is. And so what they did during the Reformations is that all this sort of crazy Catholic talk about, miracles and whatnot is just simply demonic. Right. I mean, that's what all the sort of many of the, not all, but many of the magisterial reformers on the Protestant side of the equation, simply said, yeah, this is just proof that the Roman Catholic Church is the whore of Babylon, and she is basically the house of Satan, and any miracle that anybody is claiming to either experience or see or to enact is period, full stop, demonic. Right?
Such a weird thing to limit.
Well, it is, and but I would say
like the faucet of God's power was just shut off.
It just shut off, right? Cause reasons, right? And so now I do think that I'm going to caveat it. Sorry, some of my trad friends are a version of fundamentalist. And I remember not arguing with you, but talking with you about this when you were running 1 Peter 5. The sort of the default, that in Catholicism, fundamentalism carved itself out in the traditionalist camp.
Yeah, if I ever disagreed with you then, I don't now.
No, I know you don't now. Yeah, I know you don't now.
No, but I mean, I think that's exactly what they are. They are the fundamentalist Catholics.
Right. And I would say that fundamentalism is a modernist idiom. There's no such thing as a fundamentalist in like 1272, right? There's just no such thing. It is a modern phenomena. It is a post-Reformation phenomena.
Would you argue that it is a consequence of the fracturing of Christianity?
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
Right?
Okay.
Yeah. Of course.
So it's
so
when you bifurcate, then you have to have somebody who's like, or multiple people are like, we got to get back to basics. We got to find the real thing.
Right.
All these,
So
all these, except no imitations. Yeah.
Right. And so therefore you go solo scriptura, or you go like solo magisteria, or like whatever you want to call the, sort of these Catholic versions of it and whatnot. Right. So all of this stuff to me is a footnote to the fracture. All of this is a footnote to the very, very cozy relationship that all of the churches have made with the eminent frame and with modernism. And they just have a bunch of different flavors. They have a bunch of different expressions of these kind of fundamentalisms. And so I think that they're going to struggle with this one, this larger topic that we've been talking about with NHIs and UAPs and all this sort of stuff, because they haven't carved out enough epistemic humility of that little spot, the little plot of land on the corner of the field to adjust and pivot and absorb.
You actually made a good connection there for me, because I feel like I don't feel as though I have encountered the "it's demons" explanation from any post-conciliar Catholics.
No, people
I think
like
it's
me,
all trads.
Yeah, people like me, I'm like super. I mean, I know I'm trad adjacent. This is one of the reasons.
Look, I mean, part of it is just like that's the world that we swim in, and that's
right.
Like that's where the people
I'd like
are.
to give myself a little credit here, but like one of the reasons why I consider myself trad adjacent at best is that I think traditionalism is an ideology, right? And so therefore, I am a post-conciliar Catholic. I certainly have my questions and my qualms and my pushbacks about things, as you and I have talked about ad nauseum, so we don't have to rehearse them here. But at the end of the day, I think it's the beginning of a move to be actually a little bit more of a nimble church, ironically.
What signifies that move?
Well, I mean, just think about, again, this is superficial, but believing that there is a theologian and a philosopher that you can learn from after Thomas, for instance. Right? Again, I know I'm being a little bit glib here, but I mean, because you remember the game. I mean, come on, dude, you were freaking
drives me crazy.
Yeah, but it was like, oh well, that's the new theology.
Yeah.
Like, all right,
100%,
so like,
100%.
so like, so Ratzinger just has nothing to say. Like, you just dismiss him out of hand, or John Paul II has nothing to say, or even Rahner or von Balthasar, or like any of those Communio guys. They showed a path forward to being a much less sclerotic and calcified ideology, and everybody just took a pee all over it.
Yeah, but the nature of fundamentalism is to say, this is how God set it up, this is how he wants it, and if you change it, you're inauthentic, and it's what the devil wants, right? And so we wind up back here at the topic du jour, where it's like something exists outside of our epistemic framework, outside of our ideological, theological, soteriological, ecclesiological framework, right? And we don't know what to do with that, because Jesus died for all men, not for all little green men, or not for all reptilians, or not for all, insectoids.
Yeah,
or
I think
whatever.
Lewis is actually, C.S. Lewis is really kind of good on this. I recommend you kind of poking around with what Lewis said about aliens and all that kind of stuff. I think it's really an interesting.
No, I mean, obviously he handled it very well in Out of the Silent Planet and
and Paralandra, yeah, for sure.
I mean, that hideous strength feels like it's its own world, but to me,
well, it's because it's here. It's Locandra, right?
Yeah.
I guess ultimately my takeaway, at least for the time being, for this episode, is really where you started us off, and where we seem to keep going back to, which is, you need to have a kind of practice of epistemology which allows for mystery and the unexplainable. Again, maybe it's tentative.
And mystery, by the way, is not an Agatha Christie novel where you get the answer at the end.
That's right.
The hardest thing about dealing with mystery is that you may not ever get an answer that's satisfying.
Right. So, and I'm sure you can rattle off all the things that the church officially calls a mystery. Well, like, I think that's something you should lean into, right? I mean, the Trinity or the transubstantiation or all these kind of things, right? Grace. I mean, all these things. It's like, it's not entirely clear. Like, what does it mean when Jesus says, me, me and the Father are one? Like, well, gosh, like what?
Right.
Like, I don't. And I have one of my very good friends, Sam, is, a hardcore Unitarian, and he's a really, really bright guy. And he's like a dog with a bone with that. He's going to comment in this, I'm sure. But, he's like a dog with a bone with this, but he's like, no, I'm really kind of like, I want to understand this thing that we just kind of call a mystery. And so I admire his tenacity in that regard. I'm a little bit more comfortable, but fine. But, the religion, the religion that I adhere to, is not fragile. And I take great offense at those people speaking in the name of my religion that would make the church more fragile, that would make the faith more fragile than I think it is, number one, just full stop. But also in practice, you're setting up a bunch of people for, a crack when the flip happens.
Yeah, you are. And it's because this is where it gets crazy, but it's because you think that God is going to show up and right the ship at a certain point where things can't go any further.
Yeah.
The literal Deus ex machina solution arrives.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Look,
and I know this because this is what broke my faith.
That's right.
I mean, among other things,
yeah.
A lot of personal things broke it.
Mm-hmm.
But intellectually, the thing that I found breaking me down was thinking I knew where God had drawn lines in the sand. And then every time those lines got crossed, I'm like, oh, he doesn't actually care.
Mm-hmm.
He doesn't actually care.
Where's the action function?
Right.
Yeah. No, I get that.
We didn't think it could get worse. No, it got worse. Oh, he's okay with it getting worse. Nobody's coming to save us. Nobody is coming to save us. It's just going to keep happening. It's going to keep getting worse. Or if we make it better for a little while, it'll get better. But it's going to happen the way it happens. And he isn't stepping in. Which is why I'm so allergic to people being like, praise Jesus, he found my car keys this morning. It's like, no, he did not. You got lucky. And I mean, I have had better luck with St. Anthony than any human being on the planet.
Yeah.
So, I mean, don't get me wrong, but it's like, he helped you, but he didn't help the girls, in the Iranian prisons being raped who were also praying. Like,
I would only say that, there's mystery even here. And that faith is a mysterious thing, and again, I know
it is a mysterious thing.
I know it's a cop out, to say that kind of thing, but, the economy of grace operates at a different level above and below than I have the capacity to understand. And I think that, the problem with the sort of the chest thumping of fundamentalism and the chest thumping of traditionalism and these things is that it pretends to have a kind of surety, a radical surety, that is far in excess of what we are capable as humans to sort of fully understand. And we certainly can't control it because, as you said, otherwise, why didn't you show up? Right. It's going to keep getting crappier and crap. Right.
But to apply to our show.
Yeah.
UFOs and aliens and angels and demons. I don't think God is going to show up when this disclosure happens, if it happens. Right? Like, I'm not even 100% on the fact that it's happening.
Yeah.
But there, all signs point to yes, says my magic 8-ball, but it's like, who knows? And who knows how comprehensive it'll be and what we're going to get. But I don't think people are really prepared. You have a certain you have a sanguine personality. Like, you just roll with stuff when it comes, right? In a way I've never seen. You're like Gumby. You can just take the hits. And I don't know how that works. I'm a lot more brittle because I'm more rigid about a lot of things. And so it's like, I've been prepping for this for a decade. I'm not ready.
Yeah.
I'm going to be weirded out when it really happens.
Yeah. I don't want to pretend that I'm not going to be weirded out, but all I know, is that I have to be nimble.
And then you and I are going to just wind up trying to be like, being the sensible voice of reason that's trying to get people to think about this and not, exaggerate what it is and not.
Yeah.
And it's going to be overwhelming. Like, it's not going to just be
Yeah.
the thing. It's going to be all the other people
Yeah,
going crazy because of the thing. And this
Yeah.
has been in
But
UFO lore.
But here's the thing, though,
that
Steve.
craziness is the thing that so many people are allegedly trying to avoid within the control apparatus. They think society is going to break down. People are going to go nuts.
Right. And I get that. Right. So look, I feel like this is like the witnessing portion of the program. Testify. But for real, like I believe in Jesus. I mean, I believe in Jesus, and I believe that he so loved the world, that God sent his only son and he died on my behalf. And I believe all that stuff. Like, I really do. And so, and you might say to yourself, Kale, how do you believe that? And fair enough. But, and God, this sounds so cheesy when you say it out loud. So apologies in advance, I guess. But I mean, like, I believe that he died for me, like I do. And so
it is kind of the point of the whole religion is believing that part.
Yeah. Fair to say it right. And so, I don't believe in ultimate abandonment. I also scratch my head and pull my hair out at certain times about feeling the feeling of abandonment. You know me too well for me to sort of lie to you.
You don't need to explain.
Yep. But I do believe in, the coming of the kingdom. I believe, just like, the old Baltimore Catechism taught me to believe, which is my job is to know, love, and serve the Lord in this world and be with him forever in the next. And so if he wants to throw aliens and disclosure into that mix, then, I'll find a way to square the proverbial circle. And also, honestly, just having a certain kind of humility to be okay with not knowing, which drives me nuts because you and I both really like to know stuff.
We do.
Right. But at the end, it's a bigger thing. In the meantime, however, you and I are going to monitor the heck out of the situation. And
Bloodhound gang, whenever there's trouble over there on the double, Mr. Bloodhound isn't here.
Right. We're going to continue to monitor because, that's what we do. And I think both of us have a healthy concern that people are not monitoring the situation, I guess is what we're saying. And
not monitoring it correctly.
Right. And that a bunch of fools are being put in front of us as if they're the ones who are really monitoring the situation. You and I are not claiming special knowledge. But what you laid out for us, especially in the first hour of this conversation, is like, there's a lot that has happened.
So much.
There's a lot that is going on.
I went over an hour just trying to do 101. Yeah. It's like, it's too much.
Yeah. Right. So, for me, it helps me focus on like the ultimate things. Like, I love my family. I want to see my children get married and have kids. I want to live a life of integrity and purpose and help move the needle with some people that, that can use my talents, whatever. Right. I mean, it's true. Like, I actually do believe that. And I believe that, I'm 53. I'm probably going to be gone in 30 years. So, okay.
Yeah. All right. Listen, we're at 2 hours and 45 minutes. So we're going to go.
Yeah.
I just changed
to the red
because we're going to hit audience questions. We have a few. We might as well.
Yeah, go ahead.
We might as well. We're already at almost 3 hours. We're in Rogan territory at this point. Let's see.
Man.
Audience questions. You know what? Thanks, Grok. I threw a bunch of stuff into Grok because I wanted data to come back. And it summarized my summary and changed the quotes. So these are not direct quotes from anybody.
These are
Grok
anymore. Filtered questions. What have we done?
I was like, fill this in a little bit more. I need some data points to make sure I'm getting the facts right.
Yeah.
And I wrote this long audience questions. So this is not going to be word for word. Sorry, Grizz, but you're first.
Love the general.
And I only know that because he asked a very grim Grizz question.
Yeah.
He talks about Spielberg's Disclosure Day.
Yeah.
move. Actually, no, he didn't ask someone. He asked a different one. He asked about, is Epstein's genetic research and UAP link going to continue along the lines of this? I wish I had the original question.
Yeah, so I would say this about that. I think that's a breadcrumb that is worthy of further exploration, but I don't know enough. But the fact that Epstein owned land adjacent to Area 51
Zorro Ranch
is, I think, an important thing. And again, there's all kinds of stuff.
Here's his actual question. I found it. Yeah. You think the connection between Epstein's genetic research and UAP stuff will get thicker or thinner? I don't know enough about genetic research that he was doing. I know he was talking to a lot of scientists. I know the Zorro Ranch thing. I know he was funding people when government funding got cut when it wasn't supposed to. Mm-hmm. I know he knew all about Eric Weinstein's geometric unity theory of everything, even though Weinstein had kept it secret. And when he met him, he said it was really weird. The whole thing was really weird. I have had the impression for a while that Epstein is in the orbit of my physics UAP nuclear secrets territory, where he was gauging what people were into, and probably, as Weinstein says, as a construct, like he was sent out as kind of a stalking horse to find out what was going on, but for whom, I don't know.
Yeah, right.
His interest in science just doesn't fit with the rest of the story that we have about
it. Because the rest of the story is the smokescreen. If you want my honest, I think that the Lolita Express and all that sort of stuff, that's the headline grabbing stuff. I mean, it sounds to me like there was some bad stuff that went on there. I don't pretend to I'm not going to suggest that.
I mean, maybe they got a double whammy out of him. He may have been used for both.
Well, right. And that's probably where I land. I think that, like the Michael Tracy move the last couple of months of like saying, oh, guys, you're making a mountain out of a molehill. Like, I get what he's doing with that. And by calling everything pedophilia when it's not technically pedophilia, like you're never going to win any friends with that argument.
No, but I do have a problem with it.
But I get it. Yeah, but I get it.
Because I'm a pedant and it bothers me.
Yeah.
Because honestly, like, it's a lot creepier if somebody is interested in your prepubescent child than in your 16 or 17-year-old child.
Yeah. And it's different.
It is different. Like, a lot of our ancestors got married at that age. That was a thing. So it's like, it's not the same thing. One is much worse. Both are bad.
Yeah. Fair enough.
A couple people, there's another question, I didn't put a name on it. A couple people have been talking about connection to Spielberg's movie Disclosure Day.
Okay.
What does that have to do with this? So, do you have a theory on that? I have a little bit of one.
Yeah, I have a little bit of one. Go ahead. You start.
You, because I talked the most.
So I think that I think disclosure is part of what you called control. I think the movie Disclosure is part of controlled disclosure.
Disclosure Day is
exactly. Yeah. In other words, like, I think that people are talking to him. I think he knows stuff. I think, maybe he's been put up to it, but they're way too, even in the small little trailers that you and I saw, there's loads of little Easter eggs for UAP hunters.
Well, I mean, I saw people talking about something like holographic projection, which I don't know anything about.
And the click, 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 so clearly he's immersed in the lore. How much of the lore is mythology and how much of the lore is actually part of secret stuff? Your guess is actually literally much better than mine.
I mean, people said for many years that Close Encounters was alleged to be the closest to the real thing. Close Encounter, if you want to look for two movies that tell you more about the real UAP phenomenon, it's Close Encounters of the Third Kind, 1977, 79, something like that.
77.
And then The Abyss.
Yeah. Wow, that's good.
Because all this stuff is going on under the ocean.
Yeah.
Congressman Timmershett says that he's gotten intelligence briefings saying we believe they have bases under the ocean and all this kind of stuff.
And to Close Encounters of the Third Kind, there's an interesting French scientist that featers prominently in the movie that is Jacques Vallée, right?
Yeah.
So
he's transparently Jacques Vallée.
Yeah.
I agree with you 100%. I am under the impression that it's controlled disclosure. I did watch an interview with Spielberg a couple weeks ago, and it's the only one I think he's done recently, where he flat out said, I don't know anything any of you guys don't know. I don't believe it any more than I believe Elon when he says it.
Yeah, I don't buy that. I don't buy it for a second.
I mean, the guy's name is Spielberg and he makes movies. What? The pastor's name is Didio and he's a pastor and it means of God. Really?
Yeah, I know. It's like, yeah. Okay.
I'm
A
getting
little bit on the nose there, folks. A little bit on the nose.
So moving on. Yeah, I think people are saying, is this marketing for Disclosure Day? That's one of the things I've seen. No, it's the other way around.
Yeah.
Disclosure Day is marketing for this.
Yeah.
For the real thing
that's
really happening. And I recommend, I haven't listened to it yet because I haven't had a chance. Bryce Zabel and his co-producer of Dark Skies, his name always blank out on it. It's not even a hard name. It's like Brett something. Anyway, and I'm probably wrong. But Bryce Zabel and this other guy made this show called Dark Skies in the 90s. And it was kind of like they saw that X-Files was doing well. They wanted to do something else. And they had a bunch of alien-themed government type stuff. And I never saw the show. But he told this story about how this guy showed up at the Hollywood premiere party at his house for the pilot episode of the show that had never been released to the public. This guy wasn't invited. He identified himself as being with naval intelligence or something like that. And he knew everything about the show. He said, you've got some great stuff in here. You got a lot of the themes are really close to the real thing. We want to give you more information because maybe you could seed some of this out to the public, kind of a thing, right? So he tells this whole story. And then, he's very cryptic. The guys are like, who are you and why are you even here? How do you know about these episodes? And he won't give them answers. And he writes this formula on the back of a napkin or whatever and says it's all about sound, light, and frequency. And then basically says, in 20 years, it's going to make a lot more sense than it makes right now. And then he leaves. And they were like, what the hell was that? But then later they realized, oh, like this happens. Like the government shows up.
Right. I think it's important for folks to realize that there is a much, much deeper connection between the government and Hollywood than anybody would feel comfortable admitting.
In terms of narrative management and curation.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Right. I mean, this goes back to before the Second World War, right? I mean, that one of the most powerful, mechanisms for small d disclosure is Hollywood. And so this will surprise me zero. I mean, all these TV shows, like, TV shows about the CIA, TV shows about X-Files, they all talk to government entities, and it's really, and so therefore it's like, well, what are they sharing and why are they sharing it?
Look, and as a storyteller, I mean, I've never finished a novel or anything, but I've worked on a couple of drafts, and it's like when you're writing about this stuff, I at least want to be as close to reality as possible.
Absolutely.
Because it gives it an air of plausibility.
Yeah.
And so if the government shows up and is like, you know what? Why don't you say this? Because this is actually what really happens. I don't know why you wouldn't put that in.
Eat it up.
And so anyway, these guys who did this show in the 90s and then dismissed this guy and regretted it later that they didn't talk to him more. Bryce Zabel has become a big UFO guy over time. And, he did the podcast Need to Know for a couple of years with Ross Coulthart. I think he's still doing it with Richard Dolan. Now he's started this new podcast called Sound, Light, and Frequency. And my understanding is that it's about government interaction with Hollywood about narrative shaping. So would be an interesting podcast to watch. I haven't seen it, So, but that ties into the Spielberg thing. I didn't have a lot of questions. Let's see. We already covered. Someone said disclosure's right around the corner. We covered Epstein. Somebody asked about the Nephilim. I got nothing.
Yeah, I don't know what to make of that.
I've never understood that story. I've never known what to do with that story. I don't know if it's supposed to be literal, allegorical.
Yeah.
You got nothing?
Got either? Nothing, honestly. I mean, it's interesting. I pay attention to it. That's all. I pay attention to it.
And then let me just look
interbreeding between humans and NHIs. Like, wow, okay, keep going. Interesting and genuinely, but I don't know what to make of it yet.
Our regular commenter Skankenstein. Says why are they waiting for Disclosure Day? Is there something special about that day? I assume he means not the movie, but the actual, like, when everything's going to be released. He says, I don't understand why there are all these soft leaks before the big day. Why not just announce things now? I think the soft leaks are, again, a product of the factions. I think Trump being the wrecking ball, being the paradigm breaker, being a man concerned very much with his own legacy,
Sure, of course. Yeah.
sees an opportunity to do something here that feels like a really big deal, and he's willing to do it. But Trump, even like just a couple days ago, he was on another show or interview that I saw, and he was like, I don't really personally believe in this, but I talk to a lot of very credible people who say that it's real.
All right.
And I trust them.
Yeah.
It's just not my thing. So it's weird because he's like, he doesn't come across as having any personal investment in it.
Same. Interesting. I agree with that. But the part that I probably disagree with you a little bit about is I think that it's all about priming. Look, a good storyteller knows that you have to prepare the audience for the shock that they're going to receive at the turning point in Act 3. And I know that makes me sound all like, woo, but I really mean it. In other words, you can't just throw the thing on the proverbial UFO on the lawn of the White House, right? It has to be sort of like set up, like you have to prepare the ground to receive the seed. And so I think that's what is going on here. But two things can be true at the same time, Steve, right? So anyway, that's what I got.
So I was looking to see if we have any more questions.
All right. Well, I gotta beat it in a minute here.
Okay.
Duty always calls, Steve. Duty always calls.
Yeah. Duty is a pain. Help us understand Matt C says, help us understand the landscape of perspectives on this potential new disclosure about aliens tinkering with humanity and seeding civilization. What arguments could make this digestible, or any of them arguments that Christians might plausibly use?
I don't know. That's a good question, actually.
It is a good question. Look, one of the weird things about you and I doing this show is you're very Catholic. I'm very steeped in Catholicism, even though I'm not part of that anymore.
Yeah.
Like it is the framework through which I view the world, even when I don't want to.
Yeah.
Because I'm in this place of like, I don't really know what's true about any of this stuff, but I'm open and I'm searching. Like, I'm open to any explanation that makes sense, but I plan on applying a heavy degree of skepticism to things.
Yeah.
Like, I'm open to the idea that demons are some kind of alien. Like, maybe they are. I don't know.
Yeah.
And I don't know what I believe about God and about Jesus. And I'm an agnostic who prays, but I don't know what where that message is going on the other side.
Yeah.
Very confused about all that stuff. So for me, I'm just going to look at everything that's being said and I'm going to run it through my bullshit filters. And I'm going to say, how do I feel about that? Like, and if something gives me the creeps, I'm not going to be quiet about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I don't know how you would approach, like, what if they tell you, Mormon style, that Jesus is just a godlike alien who, came to this planet to try to do whatever. And he's not really what we were told. That was the story we were told.
Yeah. No, I get it.
Because that is the narrative that these pastors are saying we're going to be sold. And I don't.
Yeah. I mean, I'll be skeptical about that, of course, initially. I'm not a credulous rube. I'm not going to be sort of so easily knocked off of my commitments. But I don't know. Therefore, I
think in terms of the power of story,
right.
The idea that some advanced race of beings that are essentially indistinguishable from gods to, prehistoric humanity could have come and set things up. People ask questions all the time. Why are we the only race on this planet that evolved to consciousness and self-awareness and everything? We're so close to so many of the higher primates, but we're so far. Like, and so obviously if you have a creation story, it's very cut and dried and it's pat and it's packaged and it's like Genesis, right? But it's like, but I'm interested just in terms of explanatory power. Like, I don't know, maybe some civilization uplifted one group and was like, let's modify their DNA. Like, we have the technology potentially to do things like that.
Yeah. I'm going to take a flyer on this one because it's certainly something that but I mean, look,
it's fair. It's fair.
I don't want to give Matt the hi-hat here. He's a friend of mine. I've broken bread with Matt. But it's just always interesting to me that all these people come out and talk about it. They always talk about Christianity. They never talk about Hinduism or Islam, really. they always talk about Christianity is always in the crosshairs. And so I just sort of note that as a data point.
Yeah. Well, it is the dominant religion on the planet.
Is it? Yeah, maybe
if
so.
you include all the Protestants and all the Catholics and everything, it's way more than Islam.
Yeah. So I think that's interesting. But it's also like a kind of tired story. Like, I mean, how many different people are going to show up and say like, well, Jesus was a good guy, but I mean, really, he was kind of misunderstood. And it was, it's like the Dan Brown thing over and over again. It's just, I just
don't see this being the story that comes out at all. I think that if we're right, and this is a play by the Collins elite to grab the narrative before the narrative comes out, and they took the most credulous guys who were ready to run with it and gave this to them, then saying this is going to be the attack on religion. There will be some people who say this because people already say this. People are already saying, what if, like that. I've read this theory a million times. It's not new.
Yeah.
But I don't think that President Trump is going to come out and say that. I don't think.
No, it's not. No. I don't think so either.
I don't think anybody within the government apparatus is going to say this is the story, but this is what these guys are acting like.
I think the concern is that some kind of NHI will say this.
Maybe, but I don't think they're going to reveal themselves. And the big question that we didn't answer.
The hiddenness of aliens?
Why? Yeah. The alien hiddenness problem. Like, why are they here? Why do they not care that we see them to the extent that we have thousands and thousands of reports and all this stuff? Why are they seemingly messing with us and with our animals and with everything? But they just don't give a crap about whether they say, hey, we're here and this is what we're doing.
Yeah. Maybe maybe the joke is not that humans will believe in anything, but maybe the aliens are sitting there thinking like, my God, they won't believe in anything. I mean, we show them crap all the time. We have these experiences. We take them up in our ships. We do all kinds of weird things, and yet they still won't believe it. Right.
That's brilliant. We don't have the theory of mind to know the way aliens think things are convincing,
Yeah, that's right.
All right. Well, I know you got to go. That's a good place to end it. Man, we could do so many episodes on this. Guys, if you want more episodes on this stuff,
please let us know.
Going forward, let us know. If you have questions we didn't hit, let us know. If we didn't get to your questions, sorry.
Sorry, my bad.
Yeah, it's Kale's fault.
All right, brother. Be well.
All right, man. Bye.
Be well.